So the film Prey opens up with a black screen. And next we hear a woman's voice setting up a mood where actor Amber Midthunder, as the character of Neru, says, "A long time ago, it is said, a monster came here." And she first says it in Comanche, and then she says it in English. Then a shot fades in, and we're treated to this glorious view of a river at dawn. We see deer, we hear ducks, beetles chirping, a breeze lightly blows through the weeds, and we see objects of a Comanche reservation made out of animal skin blowing too. And my first impression already, Eric, is this is really good. I'm really drawn in here by the filmmaking, the terrific cinematography work of Jeff Cutter. Have you seen any of Jeff's other works other than, I think you did see 10 Cloverfield Lane, right?
If he did that, yes. I don't remember much in terms of cinematography of that one, but I will say the cinematography in this film, it was absolutely one of the highlights. In terms of how it starts out, the visuals, what did strike me was that there is that temptation often to do that sort of like, it leads in and there's that cushioned romantic feel to it, nostalgia. This one, because it starts out in silence and it's just animal sounds, and you don't get that like a golden hue to it. It feels cold.
Yeah.
And she wakes up. It feels like a cold morning out on the plains. But I mean, it might be because I saw it on a 75-inch screen. And unfortunately, this didn't get a cinematic, a theatre release. So some of my impressions will be because I saw it on as close to a home cinema experience as you can. But yeah, I definitely got it. It's not that sort. I mean, I've said before, it's more. It's not like the kind of take I would have done. It's more of a personal journey film. But there's not that kind of. And it's weird to say because it is a Disney film, but there's not that Disney-esque feel to how it opens. It feels like it's grounded. And as you as the audience come into the story, the village itself is waking up. But before they wake up, the animals are already waking up. So it brings you into the environment. It's a weird sort of, like, it's not something I'm thinking of when I watch it, but you mentioning it does sort of ease you into the life of the tribe, because this is the kind of stuff someone in the tribe would notice as they wake up. And of course, she's not just peacefully coming awake. Someone literally kicks her. And she's like, "Oh, what?" It's like the Native American version of an alarm clock. And I think it's her mother. But yeah, the cinematography on this film, if whether you like it or don't like it, I think most people have mentioned the cinematography really helps this stand out from what it otherwise might have been. There's some beautiful shots throughout the whole thing, but even on the first view, you do get some like the great sort of bird's eye view of just going down over the forest. And it's not like you get in a typical Predator film where it's like jungle drums and it's like it builds up to momentum. It's just a nice sweeping shot, and it contrasts so well with that narration she gives at the start, because it's like with Anna in the first Predator film, and she's talking about the demons who make trophies of man. It's not like that. It's just this very calmly delivered statement. A long time ago, it is said, a monster came, and then morning sounds. And it didn't give me chills, but it's the kind of thing where it's that kind of tone to it. It was very nicely done.
Well, immediately I paid attention to this, and I believe it was Jeff Cutter who did 10 Cloverfield Lane, and I don't recall the cinematography leaving that much of of an impression with me, but sometimes the material is limiting, right?
I think with
That movie,
Cloverfield Lane, I will just say that would have been very difficult because with that, it's a lot of corridors. It's a very claustrophobic
yes.
film. This one is the opposite. It's all open expanses.
That's what
So
I'm saying.
yeah,
That movie took place in a bunker, but this
yep.
little bit of prey, just already a little bit, is already wonderfully drawing me into the setting and of a mood of another time. And I'm already impressed. And then we get this music that cuts in, right? And we hear these string instruments, perhaps violins, and we're introduced to this terrific score by Sarah Shaner, I believe is how you pronounce her name. But she's another. I'm not familiar with any of her previous work, but this opening music is nice and fitting. It's somber in a way. To be honest with you, it takes me back to a small budget film with Arnold Schwarzenegger. I know it's funny to say small budget and Arnold Schwarzenegger, but
Yeah, yeah.
it was a 2015 low budget film titled Maggie. It was a zombie movie where
That's
they,
actually what I consider his best performance, Maggie. He did an amazing acting performance. You wouldn't have thought, again, Arnold Schwarzenegger isn't synonymous with, and I say it honestly, he's not a name which is typically put hand in glove with good acting, but Maggie was a great performance he did.
yeah, I thought so too. And Abigail Breslin, I think was her name, but and that zombie movie, they treated the infection like a cancer. But I digress. I don't believe they used string instruments in that Maggie movie, but a synthesizer instead. But it brought up the same feel, this somber, warm softness. And already, I'm just 1 minute in the movie, and I'm already impressed, of this Predator film. So then we see Naru. Um, Am I pronouncing that right? Naru. Um,
Yeah, I think that's how it's pronounced in the film, Naru.
Naru.
Yeah.
Yeah. And she's a young 20 something Comanche woman asleep in a teepee with her dog, Sari. And as you were saying,
Can I just interject here?
yeah,
I
go
must say,
ahead.
because I think a lot of Predator fans might, if they've got a dog, I'm going to name it Sari. It should be noted that Sari is just the Comanche word for dog. So every time she's saying, "Hey, hey, Sari, come here, Sari," she's literally saying, "Hey, dog, come here, dog. How do you do, dog?" But in Comanche Native American sort of culture, I think that was just the way they did it. They just called the animal by the what type of animal's name. So it's not the name for that specific animal, but she's just literally saying, "Hey, dog, you dog."
I didn't know that, Eric, and
Yeah.
that takes me to a neighbor of mine that he named his cat Cat.
Yes.
I thought it was the most funniest thing. But he was a Native American. I think he was just being silly,
There you
but
go.
yeah.
Yeah.
But so she's harshly shoved awake by foot, like you were mentioning before, and I guess you were saying that's a traditional way to.
No, I think it's just like it's the kind of thing. It's not a romanticized thing. It's just like, hey, you get up, thump. What? It feels like that's what would happen back then.
Yeah, it seems not the best way to wake up in the
Yeah,
morning, but
it's like if you're in the military, I guess you'd probably get something similar happening.
yep. So she gets up and she sighs and she joins the women of her tribe on a trek to dig up root vegetables. They look like beetroots, maybe they were digging, possibly. I wasn't sure.
Yeah, I was not sure.
Yeah. But then Naru stares longingly at the trees, and the next scene opens up where Naru is practicing her axe throwing abilities, and I believe it meets the definition of a tomahawk,
Yeah.
and she appears to be a very good, lack for a better word, marksman, and and after so much firepower in the franchise, how refreshing is it to see our protagonist proficient with something other than a gun, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, um, Especially because I think a lot of people were because as soon as we knew this was Native American, a lot of people were assuming, oh, it's all going to be about bows and arrows, and Native Americans they had a lot more options It's like how Hollywood has glamorized one side of it, but I mean, although you don't get it much in this film, I was hoping to see more of like the darker side of the Comanche themselves. They have a lot of really nasty, like torture methods, for example. You don't see any of that in this, but it's nice to see things like tomahawk, and of course she has this very inventive way of not needing to go over and fetch the tomahawk later. But yeah, as you say, it's nice to see these what by today's standards would be very unconventional. I mean, you might get. I mean, you could say it's a throwback to the original Predator with Arnold's character throwing the knife, saying "stick around," but it's nice to see. It's not something you typically see in a Predator film or whatever. It's a tomahawk. I don't know if they traditionally killed animals with it, but it feels like it's something small you could carry. It's not like a spear. It's something small you could carry at your hip. It feels like something like her character would have on her for maybe doing other tasks with, but she can also throw it. So it's in Comanche, women were not allowed to hunt, and that is kind of in this, but they don't really go into it, which a lot of people were assuming they would. But you do kind of, so it kind of felt like if you're not allowed to hunt, it's something you might do in your spare time, on your own personal time, because she feels that need, and that's what you get in this. She goes, yeah, I feel the need, I want to do that, and she takes out, and you see her. But the other thing it serves is it's to show the audience that she's not just somebody who's completely new at it. She's been doing this for a while. She's hitting the mark. And you can see, I mean, I'm sure they did some trickery on set, but it looks like she's putting force into it. It's not just like, and it hits a tree. It looks like somebody actually throwing a tomahawk, and it's biting into the wood, and then it leads into her trying to get an animal, but she's not catching the animal. She's not like a really proficient hunter. This is something she's done in her own time, but you can tell she's not like a top level hunter. She's hitting a target, but it's like in you remember in the first AVP comic, and Machiko, she speaks of this predator she sees killing aliens, and she said, "Oh, it reminds me of a samurai who's really proficient. He's done a lot of practice, but he's had no practical experience." And that's what came to mind in this scene. It is probably not something a lot of people would, but that came to mind in this scene. She's had a lot of theoretical stuff. She's gone out on her own in the woods, but as soon as she sees, I'm going to go and hunt that thing, and she fucks up. She doesn't do it. It's nice to see that she doesn't. She's not this. She does it first time sort of thing. But it's. Yeah, and it's a tomahawk, as you said. It's not something you're typically seeing, and you wouldn't see in this day and age someone using a tomahawk either.
Right.
When they would be using a knife, or I mean, what would you get these days? Like a hatchet? Who's going to carry a hatchet around with them and do this?
Yeah. So describe the scene you're referring to. It's when Naru notices the hoof prints in the mud, right? And so she tracks that unexpected deer nearby. And but when she's about at least to attempt to kill it, it's not because of her bad aim, but she hears a rumble in the sky.
Rumble, yes.
Yeah, and the deer gets spooked and starts sprinting away. And Predator fans, even though it's not revealed yet, we're like, "Oh, we know what that rumbling is. You know, that's a predator ship above." But it's not revealed yet to the audience. And then both Naru and her dog pursue the deer down the hill, and Naru's showing off her athleticism here by sliding under a fallen log and resuming her chase without falter. Then Naru goes for the kill and throws her axe at the deer, but misses and hits the tree. But that is a fast-moving deer. But then, so, and I want to talk to you about this. So then she hears her dog yelp, and she discovers that Sari's tail is stuck in what appears to be the claws of a metal bear trap. And this, I wondered during my viewing, is the tail heavy enough to set something like that off? I mean, I realize the narrative they are telling here is you couldn't allow her dog's leg to be caught and injured. But this felt a little unrealistic to me, with the caveat, the little knowledge I have with such bear traps. Do you think?
Yeah, I mean, because it's off camera, that's what gives you the wriggle. You don't know what happened. I mean, I was thinking, I agree with you. I think in myself, I think, how did its tail get like that? But it wasn't something I really linked, because I have no clue how it would, like, the trap might have been on its side on a tree. It might have been as the dog went past, and because the dog was running, it might maybe it did put its leg on it or something, but it's going past, and as it goes, the dog, it doesn't go fully past, it catches it. Anything could have happened. It's because it's off camera. Because, I mean, the tail is not going to be on the ground. The tail is going to be something that gets trapped. But yeah, it's not something which really bothered me. Like, there, as I say, there's wriggle room with it, but I'm glad it was one of those ones that's flat. It didn't have the serrated teeth, because that would have made me go, no, don't do that to an animal. But,
yeah.
Yeah.
I've talked to so many Predator fans, and prior to this movie coming out, they're like, please kill as many people as you want. Just don't hurt that dog.
Yeah.
They're so sensitive. There's so much passionate animal lovers, and animals are felt to be, especially dogs and cats, so innocent. Right. And
yeah, I was prepared for it, but there's a couple of scenes in it where the dog does that. I think it's going to kill the dog, but I will say that how the dog does not get killed is believable. But I'm thankful it didn't happen. I know it's a cliche, like in Independence Day, where the dog just jumps through the little thing and the explosion happens behind it. But it's nice that the dog's, spoiler alert, the dog, it's not unscathed. I mean, it gets trapped and things. It almost gets the ripped out of it from a bear. But there is one thing. I don't know if it happens here or later on, but there's something that happens, and the dog is at one point, and Naru's doing all this stuff, and I just thought to myself, oh yeah, it's later on where she rescues it in the camp, and she kills all these people, and the dog's tied up there, and she's going to rescue the dog, and I just thought to myself, congratulations, your dog is now scared shitless of you, Naru, because she's done all this stuff. But I would also like to say that animal, it does a great performance, and they were not planning on having that dog on the set as much as they did. That dog does some great, and it was adopted especially for the film. And it
was from a rescue shelter.
Yeah, and it does some really great acting, and that's not something you often hear, but it does some good animal acting in this film, which is nice.
It does, and the dog's real name is Coco.
Yes,
and it's such a great dog, and so I was glad for also a lot of our Predator fan community that the dog wasn't killed. Which is weird, because this is a franchise all about ripping skulls out and all the rest of it. And, you do see animals getting literally, decapitated and stuff. But it's natural. You don't want, especially a heroic animal, but it's doing its duty. Yeah. It's helping. You feel it should be rewarded with at least survival. Yep.
And it is.
Yep. So thankfully, Naru frees Sari from the trap and applies some healing herbs to the dog's tail from a pouch she is carrying with her.
And that was a nice touch too, because you're given these little subtle reminders as this is what she is trained in, which comes in later in the film. It's nice to have those, because at the moment they're not red flags at the time you watch them, but when the herbal stuff does come into play, you think back and you go, oh yeah, she peel the dog's tail. And like that. So it's showing you she's got expertise in something that's relevant. It's got meaning. So it's not just a scene that's just showing you, oh, the dog got trapped. It's got relevance to the plot.
And I like that. And there's a lot of that in this movie, a lot of setting up and planting seeds and callbacks,
Yes.
and we'll get there. But yeah, I do appreciate that. And
I mean, I
well,
will say before I watched Prey for the first time, the night before, I did watch the original Predator because I wanted to refresh in case there were any callbacks. And the original Predator, as I was watching it, it reminded me of how efficient the original Predator was.
yeah,
Structure-wise, the narrative on the original Predator film, it's got those same kind of thing. It's got that flow where, okay, there are these little, stick around type moments, but
yeah.
most of it is very, you see Billy's got these tracking skills. He comes across the cadavers, all that kind of stuff. It comes into play as it goes along. And in this film, you get a similar thing. Things happen, but they come into play as it goes along.
And I love the fact that even though Predator, if that film, that original 1987 film, had Schwarzenegger doing one-liners like "stick around" and "knock knock" through the
Yeah.
whole entire movie, I think it would ruin the suspense
Yeah.
and the tension we were feeling. So it was so nice to see it drop when the Predator appeared in that movie, and at least in the beginning here, there is none of that. This
No,
feel.
that's why I picked up on when I watched the Predator. I felt when it gets to the gorilla camp attack, it does kind of feel a bit cheesy because it feels a
Yeah.
little bit like an episode from the A Team. And I believe actually when they were filming it, they were doing it like a parody of what was going on in Hollywood at the time. But it's as soon as the gorilla camp attack is over, that's when the film picks its shit up and it goes A to B, and
Yeah.
it's as serious as you can get. Here, there's no cheese. It starts off as it means to go on, and that's with the advantage with Prey. It just you get that serious tone from the very start, and it goes through.
Well, I would agree with you at this moment. There's no cheese. And at some
Yeah.
point, I do believe there is a relative comparison to that gorilla camp. And that gorilla camp in that
Yes. Yes.
first
Yes.
movie would not work. The movie Predator 1987 would not work as well for me if that came later in the movie after we're getting
Mm.
all this tension and gritty suspense and fear, that it would make a lot of that dissipate if it appeared later in the film. And we're going to get there,
Yes.
but I actually think this occurs in this movie to its detriment. But
Mm.
we'll get there. So
Yeah.
so while investigating this alien to Naru bear trap, because it looks like she's never seen
Yes.
anything like that before. Some actual alien noises thunder through the
Mm.
sky again, and Neru and her dog travels to the hillside where Neru and Sari look up and see movement in the clouds that appear to have two glowing orange eyes. And then this camera pans up to reveal the title Prey. And
Yeah.
wow, what a gorgeous, spectacular way to incorporate your title almost 6 minutes into the movie. And I just
Yes.
love that.
Yeah. Although I still think I would have liked it if they'd have kept with the title of Skulls. But
Yeah.
Prey, the way it's revealed visually, it's got that kind of like it looks like it's engraved in stone. And you often get with Predator films, they have those orange and red hues. I mean, even back to the posters for the original Predator film, it's often in reds and oranges. In this one, it's interesting because it was in grey, and you have the grey of the sky mixing with that grey of stone, and everything feels very hard edged, and it's like it's even the water scenes, they're not soft. It's always water going against rocks or twigs that have been snapped and things, and you get that hard edge. But it's really it's just one single panoramic camera shot. It's just the camera looking up, and you have the red of the, I'm guessing, the engines on the Predator ship, and it just goes through. And of course, through the clouds, they look like fiery orbs, and you get that. But I think there's also an eagle that follows it afterwards. I think, I don't remember quite.
It it was after the title comes up, and it was the Falcon, the Hawk. That
So is that a different scene at that
yeah,
point?
yeah, it was
Yeah,
a different
yeah.
scene. I think it
But
transitions.
I mean, you can believe when she sees that go over the head. She talks about she saw the Thunderbird. You can imagine she would have seen that through the cloud. She doesn't know what it is, but there's something flying. It's big, and it's to her. She could say, "Oh, that must be the Thunderbird." It's
Yeah,
very easy to see how she, in her cultural interpretation, would have played that. She must have thought, "Yeah, this is a sign." I mean, what else can this be? There's a big thing up there. And of course,
yeah,
she's not just seeing it; she is hearing it. And it's just thought. It just come to me. It didn't come to me when I watched it. It's just come to me now. You hear that rumble, so she's associating it with thunder. But
right.
for us, we're thinking, oh, it kind of sounds like these other predator technological sounds. But to her, yeah, she's hearing this rumble across and sees it, so she's thinking, oh, Thunderbird, yeah.
Yeah, I had looked up Thunderbird, and it was like a common deity, not just
Mm-hmm.
among the Comanche, but Native
No, the whole, yeah.
Americans. Oh, yeah, almost entirely. And it was like this mighty winged spirit of war,
I mean,
and
to them,
this,
it was a physical, actual bird. And I mean, there are actually you go into cryptozoology and stuff, and there are these sightings of giant birds over North America and stuff. But to them, yeah, they would have like the tribal elders that they would have thought of it as a physical bird. But to her, you can see she's grown up with stories. So even if you're aware of it as a viewer, you'd think, yeah, she's a young woman. She's heard stories, so she would have thought of it as, yeah, that's the
yeah.
cultural, the Thunderbird.
So as we see this title, I just reflect really quick that right now I'm really enjoying being with Neru and Sorry
Mm.
here. I mean, both Amber Midthunder and Coco the dog have really captured my attention, and so far I'm loving her as a protagonist. And I think that the camera definitely likes this actress.
Yeah.
And she's good on screen. So after that title crawls away, we see the red tail hawk in the sky,
Yeah.
and that arrowhead pushed into the shot, and we hear a young man talking, saying he remembered when his father told him he was ready for his trial, the big hunt. And the camera reveals Naru aiming for the flying bird with her bow, and we see Naru's older brother, Tabe, and he's doing the talking in tribal face paint. And he continues the story where he mentions the rain was bad, and his father took him into the hills, and they crawled through the mud, and his bowstring got wet and broke, something to hang on to as we move further into the story. And then Naru makes this cute snore, suggesting the story is putting her to sleep.
Yeah.
And Tabe shows her who's boss by shooting the hawk out of the sky, like
Mm.
instantly, right? But then
He does his
Naru,
Legolas thing.
yeah, he was so good too. And then Naru proceeds to tell her brother Tabe that in the sky, like you were saying, that she saw the Thunderbird. Um, but now most of the audience certainly knows the Thunderbird is probably a spacecraft belonging to the Predator moving through the clouds. But Naru is taking what she saw as spiritual in nature, which I'm appreciating at the moment, and is something I wish the film would do more of. But we'll get
Yes.
there. But we'll get there. Um, but Naru believes this sign means that she's ready for her trial to hunt something that is hunting her. Um, so Naru heads back to the reservation, and we learn through titles here that she lives in the northern Great Plains. And the date is September 1719.
For anyone who's wondering, I looked this up, and it looks as though the northern Great Plains would have been around like straddling the border between North America and Canada, that kind of area. I mean, the Great Plains themselves are like this sort of spinal thing down the middle. But I think when they say northern Great Plains, I think it's that area. So when they later run into, French fur trappers, I guess it makes sense. I don't know if it's historically authentic, whether they would have been in that specific location, but and also it says August or September.
September, yeah.
But yeah, so at that time, you should have seen a tribe starting to pack up for the winter and move on, but you don't really see that. Also, the village should have been much bigger. There should have been hundreds of teepees. I don't know if that was a budget issue, but yeah, it's a very small village. But yes,
Yeah, they keep to themselves. But
yeah,
I'm with you. It didn't. From the minimal reading I've done, I always read that the Comanche were in the southern part of the country, near the border of
yes,
Mexico,
yeah,
and their enemy was the Spanish, not the French.
yeah.
So I was surprised to see that. But you know what? I go with it.
Yeah. I don't
It's
know if this was a part of the tribe that was elsewhere. I know typically they're in a different area, but it might have been like an outlier part of the tribe that was up north somewhere. I'd have to read
yeah,
up on it, basically. I can't say it definitely wouldn't happen, but yeah,
right.
when you read up about the Comanche, typically you hear about them in a different part, yeah.
Yeah. So Naru walks through her tribe as they live their everyday life, and you have the children, and you have the horses and the teepees, and it's all depicted via this long shot that follows behind Amber half of the way, then a long shot that leads in front of her, and I'm quite impressed with this, and I appreciate. The easier way, right, Eric, would be to just film a fixed shot to fixed shot and edit one shot after another. Campfire burning, cut. Warriors walking
Yes.
through, cut. Children
Yeah.
playing, cut. But these long motion shots are so much more difficult, I'm sure, as a
Yeah.
director, but pleasing to the eye and immersive. So I think it's really well done.
Yeah, it draws you into that. Like they use the landscapes to draw you into their world. I don't mean geographically their world, although there is that as well. But it draws you into their psychological world. So when you get Naru's perspective on things, you're kind of like you're going along with her psychological journey. You are very
Yeah.
much seeing things. You understand how she's coming to different conclusions on things. And when you do later on have her encounter things that she hasn't known before, and a lot of this is down to Amber Midthunder's acting skills as well. She plays it really well. When she is realizing things and working things out, it does feel plausible. But it's as you say, they really use the camera. This is a director and a director of photography as well, who knows how to use the camera. And I would really like to see their process for the storyboarding. This is one
Yeah.
of those films where, because of what we see, I'd be interested to see how because they would have looked at the script and they'd have gone, right, we need to do this, 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 right? How do we best get the viewer to have a visual journey? It's not just shot, shot, shot. We're actually having the film take you on a journey. It's not pulling you on a collar, but it's you are it's like the film that kind of reminds me of, you get a lot of this in a Ridley Scott film in the 1980s called Legend. He did
Yeah.
some of that as well, which is a kind of like a fantasy, a pseudo Lord of the Rings type thing.
Yeah.
But you get a Ridley Scott type of thing. He did a similar thing in that film. Yeah, it's just, you're not just getting the landscapes as a gimmick. You really are having this. It's used as a storytelling device. That's what I appreciate about this. It's not just like in I don't know, Blade Runner 2049, where you get a lot of shots, but they're money shots just because the director loves this, that, and the other. Here you do. It feels like it's serving the story. It's serving a purpose. It's at least serving the purpose of getting you to understand. This is even how her dog would see. This is, you're waking up with her. You're this is, in some points, you're feeling like this is her journey into a wider world as well, because you're kind of getting that. But it's only something that it works in hindsight once you've watched the film and you go, oh yeah, it kind of did this, that, and the other. But yeah, I can only agree basically with what you said. It's a long-winded way of saying yes.
We're going to keep applauding the camera work,
Yeah.
I'm sure, through this too. So,
Yeah.
all right. So now we're in the teepee, and we meet Naru's mother, Aruka, played by actor Michelle Thrush, and she's terrific here. And I wonder if she's Comanche. Because she just seems perfect. I learned Amber Midthunder is part Sioux Nation, part Norwegian, which is pretty wild.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But,
I think they made a point of making sure everyone either had what they call First Nation ancestry or
yeah.
some kind of. I don't know if any of them actually, they live on reservations or whatever, but they made a point of getting people who would, they'd fit the bill. They would be able to. It's very much. And it's weird because you think in terms of Native American, and typically, they're very spiritual films and this and that. And this is a science fiction action horror film, but it is a showcase for First Nation talent. And they did make a point of getting people who, I don't want this to sound offensive, but they look like they would have been people in that setting. Even like the French people, and I've seen some people on forums saying, because they understood what they were saying in French, and they said a lot of them had really poor accents, like they were clearly Canadian French accents. But yeah, a lot of the Native American characters, they it's not just having an accent, it's not just having a look, but it's having a way of speaking. And I will say, I've seen I don't know if you have, but I made a point of also watching the Comanche dub.
Yes, I did.
There is a rhythm of when they actually speak in their own native tongue, although you can see it's not matching the lips. It's actually my preferred edit, because it's
Mine
just
too.
the rhythm. It's something about the rhythm of how they're saying things. It brings out the meaning a bit, and also there are some words where you get the subtitles, it shows you what you don't get in the English version. Like there's a point where her brother is fighting the predator cloaks. In the English version, you just hear him shout out something in Native American. You don't know what it is. In the Comanche dub, when you see the subtitle, it makes it clear he's yelling out cheetah. And I thought, yes, you're calling that predator out for bullshit, and they all cheat. But yeah, it's a way of speak, and it's even like when you said it's like he's telling his story of when I was on my trial, and she just does this very Native American thing of sort of thing, and he's sort of like, oh yeah, I'm going to show you. It's a very kind of tribal humor. I appreciate that they interjected that sort of cultural way of viewing things and communication. Like even this part where some of her, before you come on to it, we will go into it, but there's a part where Naru gets caught by some members of her tribe, and they say, no, you're coming back to the village, and they get out a tomahawk and they look at what she's done to it, and they say, oh, you need a leash for your weapon. So and that's very Native American sort of the way they talk. So even things her mother said, like they're talking about the trial, and later on she said, no, the purpose of this trial isn't to win, it's to survive it. And you can see it written on the way she says it, and it's written on her face. It really conveys that. It's a really good performance. And even though it's just, it's her mother, she's basically in the village all the time, she hasn't got much to do, but it's still a really good performance.
Yeah, no, she was great. And I just loved her when she was on screen. And so here she was preparing medicine for the chief's bad knee, right? And as Naru sharpens her axe, her mother looks on and mentions, like you were saying before, that her father gave Naru the axe to cut with, and implies not to hunt with.
She has improvised. You've been given this thing. You know what? I'm going to go out there and use this thing because I want to. I don't care what you say.
Yep. I mean, she tries to get the bottom of why her daughter is so insistent on becoming a hunter, and
Yeah.
Naru explains she wants to hunt because everyone thinks she will fail as a hunter. So I guess her motivation here is to prove everyone wrong. I almost wish it was driven a different way, or maybe more relatable than just,
Mm,
I want to hunt because you think I can't do it,
yeah. Well,
but
it's
that,
like the famous quote about, I forget who it was, but the guy climbed Mount Everest, and they I don't know
yeah,
if it's apocryphal, but famously they said, "Why did you climb it?" And he says, "Because it was there."
yep,
And it's a very human quality. So the way it's conveyed is relatable. The problem with this was that in the lead up to the film, you had this bit of background character fluff that leaked from the auditions. You had certain people saying, "Oh, it's going to be politicized and all the rest." It wasn't in the film. It
no,
was just some background fluff, and like there was some background fluff for her brother too. That never made it into all these debates of people who were being really heavily negative. All that was unwarranted. For the character's journey, this is just explaining she has this driving need.
yeah,
But yes, through the film, her tribe is saying, no, you can't do it. In our tribe, this is not a role. Now, I do think I would have liked the film to have somehow conveyed it. And I was imagining that at the end she would come into contact with people from another tribe. Maybe they'd help her. And she'd have realised, oh, they have female warriors. They didn't do that here. It's very much in the Comanche, for whatever reason, it is true, they did not have female warriors, they did not have female hunters, they did not have female chiefs. They very much did have gender defined roles, but in Native American tribes, they were kind of the exception.
yeah.
Native Americans do have a long and proud history of female warriors. Custer's last stand, famously, it was a female warrior who apparently killed him. But in this film, yeah, these are very believable barriers she would have faced, and just because she wouldn't have been allowed to done something. In Comanche, women were also not allowed to choose their husbands. The husband
Mm.
chose them. It was very much that kind of society. It was very gender driven. But that doesn't mean to say there weren't young women who, even though the rules of their society didn't allow them to do things, I'm sure there were women like Naru who
Sure.
they weren't allowed to do it, but I want to do it. It was in my personal time. But whenever she comes up against, I want to do this, the closest she gets is some sort of ceremonial ritual she wants to do, which is basically facing your inner demon or something, which she does. I don't know what it is or whether it was a real ritual, but you never get a thing where she's now a warrior kind of. They celebrate her at the end, but it's not clear what they're celebrating. I think it's just she's done that ritual. But she does have this driving need. But as you say, I think it would have been helpful if it had been done a different way. But I don't have any problems with how it was done. I think within the context of the film, I think it's relatable and it's fine. It's not like a really thing they hammer home or anything. It's just, that's Naru.
I think in that ceremony, and we'll get there, so I'll just touch
Mm.
upon it. I think that ceremony made you a war chief, which I just don't think you were
Which wouldn't have happened for her.
Yeah, but I mean that's
Because
what happened with Tabe, and
yeah,
it looks like
yeah, because she's given the same spear, so it's
yeah,
implied, but realistically, like she physically cannot become a chief even after doing that. It's,
yeah,
for whatever reason, you'd have to find someone from Comanche, and you'd have to ask them maybe. Were there ever? From what I've
right.
read, there have never been any female, which is that's just how it was. But it's exclusively for Comanche. So, from a historically authentic point of view, I have to say they're celebrating something else. But I agree with you. It's identical to Tabe's ceremony, and she says, "Oh, war chief" to him. So you're led to believe
That
chief, but she can't be chief because it's Comanche.
I just took it as he wasn't still. There's many chiefs in a tribe, and being a war chief doesn't
With
mean you're a chief in charge, right?
now okay, here's the thing with Comanche. From what I've read, it wasn't an inherited role. It was the person who's done the next biggest thing.
Oh wow.
They then
Okay.
earn the right. So when we come into it, I mean, we haven't got to that part in the story yet, but he does something that earns him that right. So he's getting passed on that role. So it's believable in Comanche society, he's done that big thing. That's what earns him the right. He's now chief, sort of thing. But it would not have been a thing like where the chief has to die. So then, like, the prince takes over.
Yeah.
It's in a weird way. It's like how a lot of the EU for Predators is sort of, described. They have to kill the alien. I've killed an alien queen, so I'm next to. It's that kind of thing for Comanche. So it's because of what he did. For him, it's believable, but for her, I don't know what was going on. So, yeah.
Well, we're gonna go with this is fiction, and
Yeah.
we're gonna go with that she was becoming the war chief, which
She was
I like.
celebrated.
But look, we will get there. So Tabe enters the TP with that red tail hawk, and Naru's clearly jealous. And then the mother Aruka sends Naru out to look for orange flowers that has medicinal properties and can help out with the chief's knee.
And they're called tutsia, but apparently that is literally the Comanche word for flower.
Yeah.
So when she says orange tutsia, it's like the film's trying to sound clever, but literally she is saying, "Get me that orange flower." Like, don't.
Come on, dog, let's go get flour.
Yes, yeah, literally, that is what she's saying. But it's.
Yeah. All right.
It's one of the reasons why I watched the Comanche dub, basically.
Yeah. So then we cut to this great valley shot between multiple lush mountains, and a predator ship swoops into view with a hatch open, one that closes rapidly as a cloaking device is engaged. And then we see the ship speed off into the clouds out of sight. And the predator then stands into view and engages its camouflage technology, which surprisingly gives off red sparks instead of blue. We're used to that blue sparking within the cloak. So that was interesting.
Well, that reminded me of, weirdly enough, the first AVP film. I don't know if you remember, but the initial trailers for the first AVP film, you remember on top of the pyramid where they're shooting their... In the trailer, they were red. But when it came to the actual film, they changed them to blue for some reason. I don't know if that's deliberate, but I wonder if someone was remembering that and they thought, oh, yeah, if we make it... Maybe this is a little like an Easter egg for Predator fans. Maybe not.
That would be so cool if it was deliberate, but they're so messed up with the marketing saying this is the first time Predator's ever been on Earth. And
the director, yes.
Yeah, he's saying it's not the first time the Predator's been on Earth, only this Predator, but it's too early for... I think the director said it's too early for the plasma cannon technology. But
no,
then
he said he didn't. He thought it would be overkill, but when you actually see what it's using in the film, I thought to myself, you could have just used the gun. I mean, it didn't really make any difference. But yeah.
And we saw the gun used in AVP, if AVP exists in this canon. So it's all mixes, but I would love to know
the redness. Yeah, it made it look more primitive, if nothing else.
It definitely did. So, so back to
also
Naru.
the cloaking, it had that hexagonal look.
Yeah,
that made it look like the spaceship in The Predator. I don't know if that was deliberate, but a lot of fans have picked up on that, and they wondered if it was because they were trying to imply the old cloaking technology that's what it looked like. But
yeah, so in the first Predator movie, 1987, Eric, Jim and John Thomas created that netting to be a source of that cloaking technology, how it spreads all over the body. And of course, it's never shown in film, but that's the reason why, that netting was there. It's not just for aesthetics.
Yeah. That's what it always felt like when I watched it. And I think this Predator doesn't have any netting, does it?
No, he doesn't. So I was really hoping he would. I mean, it's a minor thing. I mean, but
it's
I was
open to interpretation.
but it would support why the cloaking looks that way, right?
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes, it would.
So back to Naru, she's collecting the orange flower, and upon returning, she hears the cries of her tribespeople, and she sees Itzy, a young warrior armed with a spear, that explains that to Naru that a lion has taken one of their people named Puhai or something, or Pui, and a bunch of the young men are going to go search for this lion. And then next, here we go about talking cameras again. Next, we're on a motion shot along a mountain trail where the armed Comanche natives move faster one by one past the camera, while these tribal beats are heard in the background. And this is starting to get really thrilling for me. And we get this plus these overhead aerial shots, probably filmed with a camera attached to a drone, I'm suspecting. And as the natives move through this wilderness, so this camera work is just so terrific.
It must be said the music throughout the whole film is beautifully done. To me, the music comes right up there with Silvestri's score. It's different, completely different, but it's got that same kind of way of ratcheting the tension up when it needs to.
It's absolutely wonderful. It's not as, I don't think it could ever become as iconic. It doesn't have as many
recognizable
hooks.
Beats. Yeah, the melodies aren't as memorable, but it's got the same vibe to it. When it makes it very atmospheric.
Yeah, yeah, and it's just it. I don't mean to lessen it to say it's not as iconic or has as many hooks. It is beautiful, and I do love it here. And it's interesting. I was hoping so much for Silvestri to come back for this movie.
Too, yeah,
because I know he wanted to, or he was willing to come back for Shane Black's 2018 yes. The Predator. But now that I've heard this soundtrack, I don't miss him. I mean,
I would have loved to have heard what he would have done with it.
Yeah.
But this is a worthy successor.
Yes.
My hat's off to as much to the composer of this music as my hat goes off to the director of photography. They complement one another really well in this. There's a synergy, is what I want to say.
Absolutely. So Nehru catches up with these young men and wants to join the search. And one of them teases her, saying, "Why join? We don't need a cook." But her brother Tabe, who's always supporting her, convinces them to let her join because she tracks well. And he convinces them that Nehru can administer medicine if they find Pui injured. And then Tabe tells Nehru, you better find this cat, which basically says to me, you better prove yourself, sister, because I just stuck my neck out for you, So he says, because you have to, So then we cut back to the Predator. And this is an interesting scene for me because we see this ant on the ground that climbs off the grass and magically into thin air, climbs into that air. And then that air starts reacting to the ant's presence, an indicator to the audience that the ant must be on the camouflage predator. So next comes a rat, and the rat eats the ant off the predator. And then a rattlesnake comes along and kills the rat.
There was an old lady who lived in a shoe.
Well, then this rattlesnake moves around. Moves around a bit and seems to sense the predator, right? And it gets into attack posture, and then is like ready to strike. And the predator kills the snake and skins it. So this seems, at least to me, as a visual indicator to the audience that the predator, number one, is only after the strongest prey. And two, is only interested in prey that is threatening to him, dangerous to him. At least that's the impression I got from the scene, what it's trying to depict. Yeah. And then possibly number three, which I plan on getting later, is the the predator either knows or is learning that smaller prey attracts larger prey and baits bigger rewards. And I think that is the theme that actually comes into this movie later, which I'm definitely planning on getting into as we move through the story. So the film goes back to Naru, and she leads this party of young men, and she finds scat with bone in it, which they identify as lion scat. Then moments later, Naru finds Pui hurt but breathing, and then the young men all break and work together to build a stretcher out of branches and net. And this is really a cool scene to see them all working together, because it's like a military unit. While the score in the background has these subtle Native American chants, it's really nice to see these working together. You know, they all break apart and they all have their duty. And
it's like in the first film where they were working together to build the traps, except here it's not for a destructive purpose; it's for a constructive purpose. That, you know, somebody's injured, they got to get him back, and she is the medic essentially. But just touching back briefly on the scene with the animals, there is a pattern throughout the film of food chain, but I didn't read it's going, you know, bait. I just read that once the snake goes in threat posture, it's watching it and it's thinking, oh right, you're going to attack me, I'm gonna, the moment you do, and it's just showing off its reflexes basically.
See, I
did think it was nice that when you see its skin, it's slightly obscured by the cloak, so it didn't feel gratuitous. If you'd have seen its skin in front of the camera, that might have felt a little gratuitous. I appreciated that it was slightly obscured with the cloak. I felt that made it feel tasteful without being, you know, it's skinning an animal. It was cleverly done.
Yeah, I agree. And I think there's more to it than that, but we'll get there. So. Yeah. All right, so Naru ministers medicine to Pui, including the orange flower that Itzy reveals could kill him, I guess, if he takes too much. But Naru assures Itzy that it won't kill him, and apparently has properties that Naru later says slows one's blood.
She says, cool the blood, I think, at one point. I don't know. There are apparently flowers that they used that were similar to that. It looks like we haven't heard the word of anyone linked to the production say it was a specific flower or not, but people have looked into it. I think they based it on things, but it looks like it might be a completely fictional flower. But I think she does say it cools the blood, and there were some herbal medications they used to do similar things in those days, but they take it a step further in this film.
Yeah, I think you're right, Eric. It is taking a step further, but there is real science to it, to a smaller degree.
Yeah. There's historical precedent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and I read too that cucumbers has some of these properties, and then I think most commonly mint leaves can lower blood pressure and even reduce a fever. So something about having an effect on your nervous system, which controls your body temperature. But yeah, they take it one step further, and that's okay, because that's what these movies are supposed to do. Predator movies, you know. I always took Predator movies as realistic movie comic book movies. You know, they're a little more not hyper realism, because I always go to that and it's the improper term. But you know how Alien is so more realistic, the first Alien, and you have these people that look like truck drivers in space. And then you have Predator, where, you know, there are all these muscle bound super, you know, they're beyond reality, even though there's realistic tension and people are dying, and
it's grounded in reality. Certainly the first Predator film it's grounded in reality, but you also get a slightly like it's not scary,
Exaggerated.
yeah, exaggerated. It just takes a little bit over just for the sake of making it
Yeah.
entertaining. Like you get Blaine hefting around a minigun. He would have
Yeah.
never been able to do that in real life, but within the film, it looks plausible. It
Yep.
looks like he's actually doing that, and it looks just plausible for you to say, we don't know how, but maybe he did something to make it work. And it clearly is working because you're seeing the characters doing it. So it does that vital thing in any film, except for a cartoon, where you have that willing suspension of disbelief. And in here, you can keep your willing suspension of disbelief. Like Mud, I think when Mythbusters did it, mud would only, it does lower your temperature, but just for a few moments, and then the mud warms up. So Dutch would never have survived in the first film like he did. But you've got the willing suspension of disbelief. Even when you know mud wouldn't work, the way it plays out, it feels like, yeah, you buy it. Because it's entertainment and it feels like, yeah, it's doing that thing.
When
Here
I was
you've got a similar
younger,
thing.
when I was younger and I saw Dutch with the mud on, I was like, why isn't heat coming off his eyeballs? Because his
I
eyeballs
did
aren't covered
too.
with mud.
Yeah, I did too. Although, in fairness, you do have that shot where it's going into the cave, and you do see it kind of like where the mud has come off a little bit. He's starting to see it. But yeah, I do remember thinking, where are his eyes not?
Why can he focus on the rat and not, his eyes as he's in that like
Right.
thicket? But all right, so they put Pui on the stretcher, and so everyone heads back but Tabe, because Tabe's going to hunt the cat, and they head back to the settlement. But Naru stops for a while when her dog finds a track and that rattlesnake, completely skinned, that suddenly moves and
Yes,
startles.
and it's headless, so you must think it must be like a reflex action. But I remember when I watched it, I thought, it's been dead for so long, it shouldn't be doing that. So I don't. Maybe it happens. I don't know. But
and she didn't even touch it, so
no.
that was just a cheap scare,
Yeah, it
So
felt. But I don't know. Maybe a zoologist can say actually they do stay. The muscles do stay. That maybe he's reacting to heat or something. But yeah,
but
it
the
did feel.
timing of it,
Yeah, it did feel a little. But the thing again, her reaction to it, she sells it.
yeah,
Amber really sells it in her reaction to it. So even though I was thinking, oh, wait, is it skinned? Has it still got a head? Oh, no, it hasn't. But I buy it because Midthunder's reaction to it feels, she's the one that makes it feel like something that otherwise might have come across a little bit video game-ish. Because it's the kind of thing you'd expect to see in a video game.
yeah.
But even though it's in a live action, you buy it because she's making it feel like that's the reaction of a real person.
Yep. Yeah. So with the skin snake, she sees a track that's too big to be a bear, and why would it walk on its hind legs, and why would it skin a snake?
I
And
like that she put that in there because if you're a tracker, you can tell whether something is walking on two legs or not.
Yeah.
And I like that it didn't go into a lot of exposition. It just had her saying it, and it's something that if you know about tracking, you'd go, actually, yeah, she would be able to work out. She doesn't need to go into how she knew. They accept it because they know, or at least if they didn't already know, her brother has told them she's a good tracker.
Yep. So she decides to go warn her brother, and Paka goes with her. And then again, I keep praising Jeff Cutter. It leads to these fantastic shots in the wilderness where it's not lit by that traditional blue light, but it's lit by Naru's and Paka's torch as they're going through, and you see these just two glowing balls of orange and it's wonderful. And I'm like, this is great. So
because you know what it's doing there, it's ratcheting up the temperature tension because you're feeling the woods, the trees closing around you. You're feeling the shadows are acting as walls. So at that point, it's turning it from a very open film, like we discussed earlier, into something that's becoming claustrophobic. And it's like, it's the same feeling you get when you see now like a film like The Reef, where it's about a great white shark, but it's a good shark film because it's one of the few films that shows you can look down in through the ocean and you can't see anything, and then all of a sudden something can come out of the murk, and it does it so, even though it's just gently cruising by, it just does it so suddenly that you just shit. And you have a similar fear. You're bracing for something to come out at her because it's a predator film, and you're thinking someone's in the trees at night. They're waving around a heat source, a giant heat source in their hand, and it's at night, and you're thinking a predator's coming. Something's going to happen. Even if it doesn't kill her, something's going to happen. And it doesn't. And it was a nice little...
I loved it, but then immediately when they find her brother Tabe, he's like, put those torches out, and it goes back to that blue, lighting.
Yes, I was going to mention, they do switch to it, but they switch to it when it makes sense.
Yes.
They use it when it's right for because if they'd have just kept it, it would have just been voices in the darkness. So, you can understand why at that point.
So, so he says he'll scare the lion, but Naru says, there's something else additional out there, but it ain't no bear, But
call back to Billy saying, "Ain't no man."
But Tabe indicates whatever it is, they have to deal with the lion anyway. So Naru says, while the cat is hunting us, we will hunt the cat, and suggests climbing up the tree and waiting for it to attack. And Tabe agrees to do it Naru's way and says he and Paka will bait the lion and lead it directly to her. And Tabe indicates that this will be Naru's trial and tells her when it comes, you tell it, this is as far as you go, no more, this is it, which sets up a stance and a saying and a challenge that will come back to both of them later in the movie. And I love this aspect.
And it's a callback to the earlier scene when she's talking about, I saw the Thunderbird, I feel for me, this is my time. And she mentioned, I forget what it's called, but she gives it a name. It's this particular trial. I don't know if it's real, but she gives a name for a particular trial. She has got to face something, hunt something, or face off against something that's hunting her. Whatever it is. And so it's a callback. And again, we were talking earlier about how things flow into it. This feels nice. Like it's a natural conversation they would have had earlier, but it comes into play here. So you're feeling like this has resonance. It's not just a random big cat attack. It's flowing.
Yeah. So far I'm liking the writing here. And so Naru and Paka climb the tree, and as Tabe leads the bait directly to the tree by laying down blood and carcasses, up on the tree, Paka accuses Naru of being too scared to kill the lion and tries to scare her more with frightening depictions like the lion's mouth is full of teeth like arrows,
Yeah.
And then suddenly the lion jumps up. You should have been paying attention, Paka, and rips Paka off the tree. And you hear him being attacked and screaming for his life. And Naru jumps to her feet and looks for the lion with her bow. And
I think he even says, "Oh, it's going to kill you. It's going to jump out at you." And it's like, I'm thinking to myself, "Is this foreshadowing?" Yeah, it's foreshadowing.
Yeah, and Paka goes out of focus, and you see the, I guess the weeds or the wheat or the fields just blowing in the wind, and my
feeding into Covenant fields of wheat.
Well, actually, kind of also reminded me of The Ghost in the Darkness, directed by Stephen Hopkins, because, they would just kind of move in there. And I was trying to spot if I could see the lion, but I couldn't. Maybe on the 4K version. But so he's ripped apart, and suddenly the lion is swatting at her, climbing up the tree to take her. It looks like a CG lion, but overall, I thought the effects...
You can tell it. A lot of fans say they had issue with the CGI predator face. I didn't. I've got issues with the face design. I didn't have issues with the CGI in the predator's face. I had more issues with it being noticeably CGI for all the animals. But at the time, even when it's the wolf and the rabbit and the snake, and here you can kind of tell it's a CG lion. But at the time, I was thinking to myself, yes, but there's no way you're going to be able to get animals doing these shots in these particular, like with a human, without it being so dangerous the insurance companies would just say, nope, we're out of here. To get these shots, I don't know how. I mean, I'm sure somebody out there would say, no, they could have done it this way. I don't know how they would have done it. And all of that would have depended on the budget for the film. I think for the whatever budget it was, you can tell the velociraptors are CGI on Jurassic Park. Does that spoil your enjoyment? No. I mean, you can tell they are. You know they're CG, but you go with it because it's a well choreographed scene. And I think that's another strength of this film, the fight choreography, even when it's animal attacks. The actual choreography of the attacks and when it's swatting at her and how it climbs up the tree, those all feel very, you know it's a CG animals, but it feels like a real threat. And that's what mattered for me. You don't get like in Alien Covenant where it's a CG alien, but my problem with that is there was no sense of weight and inertia. Here, you're getting a sense of a lion with weight and inertia when it gets up on the tree, and how it gets
He especially looked menacing with pockets of blood all over his face.
Yeah, that's another thing. I mean, we haven't come onto it yet, but there's a scene with a wolf that attacks a predator, and I noticed after it's bitten it, you see green blood on its teeth. So it's a similar thing. They had that attention to detail here,
and that helps. Sell
it really does. It sells it. Yeah.
So Naru backs slowly onto this thin branch holding a spear, and the lion slowly advances towards her. Then suddenly there's a distant roar, and I'm hoping you can help me with this. There's a distant roar and orange flickering in the distance that perhaps is the predator's cloaking technology that distracts her. Yeah. Now, as the lion jumps, she falls off the branch, hits her head on a rock, and then the screen goes black. But do you, Eric, have any idea what was going on with the predator back there? Was it roaring at Naru?
No, I don't.
Or the lion?
It was doing something. I think it's intentionally ambiguous because the most I don't think it does it in this film, but the most you should have got if it was doing that would have been like a flash of eyes or something. It was too far off in the distance. For me, I think maybe it would have seen her if it zoomed in or something, but they'd have been way too far. It doesn't, because at that point she was just facing off against it. There's nothing to have elicited that from the predator. I think the predator was just doing it was killing something else, or it was doing a predator thing. I think it was just there to be spooky predator stuff.
Yeah.
And we as the audience know, predator. But when I've seen this like 3-4 times now, I can't see anything specific. I think it's just meant to be like a Jurassic Park film. T-Rex goes rah in the distance. Is it reacting to Jeff Goldblum? It's just a T-Rex going rah. You don't know why. It's doing something. It's just there to act as foreshadowing, but it kind of feeds into it because it's a distracting thing. So I don't have problems with it, but yeah, it doesn't seem to be anything happening there. It's just predator stuff.
That's what I assumed too. I mean, I was sitting there, to be honest with you, with the pause feature, trying to see if I could get any sort of clue, but just.
I mean, you could say it's like it's had an injury and it's healing itself, but then why would it have the electrical stuff? Who knows?
It would have been neat to see it like fighting something else, maybe another bear or another creature or something.
We don't know. Maybe it's a deleted scene.
Yeah,
maybe they didn't have the money to finish up. We won't know until we get some interviews. But
right.
It's something off in the distance, because I'm only saying that because in the first film, all the characters are doing stuff, and then you see the predator get out its med kit and it removes the bullet, it goes rah, and all you see from the human characters is they just look up something. They don't know what it's doing, so.
Which is a great scene.
Don't know. Maybe it was recharging its USB socket and it got electrocuted.
Good thinking. That must be it. We'll say that's it.
Yeah, that's what it's doing. Its solar-powered recharger crapped out. It was trying to put its cannon on and it didn't work out,
that means we're dealing with a not so bright predator. Well, then again, we have other things to support that, don't we? A not so bright predator, but we'll get there. So, all right. So the next scene, we're back into the TP of Aruka, and she's creating tea in this animal skin, and Naru jarringly comes to. And her mother explains that her brother brought her home. Naru wants to go back out and hunt a cat with Tabe, but she insists if her brother needed her, he wouldn't have brought her back. And that's where you mentioned this before, Eric, that she explains that the trial isn't only to hunt, but the trial is also to survive, and she wouldn't have if it wasn't for her brother. So I assume.
But I like that logic. I really like how, because I mean, at that time, mortality rates were way lower. Like a lot of women, especially, they died in childbirth. Especially, even European women would have. Tribal women did not certainly live to a ripe old age. Her mother is probably one of the exceptions. But I like that they're kids, so they have this superficial logic of, I got to fight the boss level sort of thing, and I'm going to get the trophy. And her mother said, no, that's not the point of the game. The point of the game is to survive. You're not anything else is icing on the cake. And you can kind of like see in her expression, she's a little bit like, what the fuck? No. Sort of thing. And it's that kind of logic you get from a parent.
Yep.
It's the kind of thing a mother or father would say. It's no, you're not meant to. It's whack you on the head with a newspaper sort of thing.
It didn't go quite that far, but that would have been funny if she whacked her one.
It's the equivalent.
I know.
It's to survive, but it's not. Again, it's you're riding along with Naru, and you're assuming, like Naru is assuming, and she's as much telling the audience, no, that's not. You've got to think of the bigger picture, and maybe that also clues you in as the audience as going, oh, is the predator actually looking at things wrong? And it doesn't say yes or no, but all through it, you're thinking, the predator is very single-minded, and Naru is kind of thinking more tactically.
Yeah.
And the predator is thinking very sort of like brute force. But that's one of Naru's strengths. She's thinking even with this thing about the lion, she is thinking more tactically. But she's not saying like, I am woman, hear me roar. She's putting a plan across. It's not accepted. But she gets a chance again later on to test those things out. And that's her journey sort of thing. But
And right now, though, she's presented as she can't cut it, and a very well directed scene. One of the Comanche children yell out that Tabe is coming, and he enters the camp with the lion's blood on his face, and with the lion's body slumped over his shoulder, and the lion's decapitated.
I like the fact he's not entering all swagger, cocky. Yeah, I killed this. Like, he's looking like he's been through hell.
Yeah,
he does not look like a happy bunny. He doesn't look like, I'm going to go out there, kill 20 more. He's like, I did this. I earned this. It doesn't feel. It feels. I can buy this as a viewer.
But the expression on Naru's face is that should have been me. You could just see that, and even some of the male warriors.
It's not. No. I wanted that. It's I could have done this, and it slipped through my feet. It's not, being bitchy teenage girl. It's you understand her like she got right to the brink, and life intervened.
And let me stop here and say that I am just eating up Dakota Beavers' performance as Tabe. I mean, to me, he is a natural, and he's only 22, and he's a musician that gets casted in Prey, and is just absolutely fantastic. This is the only movie he's in, and to me, he's already out acting and outshining Amber Midthunder, the lead. I mean, he just chews scenery, and he's excellent. He's a natural. He's so gifted.
I mean, it's this kind of tradition in some films where they hire someone who's not an actor, but they turn out to give a great performance. And typically it's a comedian, and it's often because a comedian knows timing. And I suppose you could say a musician would have to have a good sense of timing, because they would have to know rhythm and melodies and what works. So maybe that was another thing that played into this with his personal background. But it's one of those examples where it's somebody who is outside of the field, but they give a really good performance. And he isn't a character who lasts the whole mile, but when he's on screen, like the mother, when he's on screen, he gives meaning to what he does and says. You do buy him as a character. He doesn't feel... He could have very easily felt like a generic Native American. And just certain little things he does elevate that performance. And although this is going to sound a little superficial, the obvious example that comes to my mind is the Underworld, the vampire versus werewolf films. I always thought the character Celine, even though it is a bit of a superficial cartoonish film, I always thought the main character Celine could have come off so much more generic and forgettable. But because Kate Beckinsale has stage theatrical training, she gave a lot of those lines and little quirks. She put a lot of things into that performance. You don't realise it, but if you ever rewatch Underworld, there are little things that she does that make you feel like she is an actual veteran. And I get it's a similar kind of thing here. This character felt iconic, but it did feel like a memorable performance. People say Tabe, I will know who they mean.
Yeah.
Now I'll go, that character, yeah.
Yeah, he's good. So they refer to Tabe as war chief now. We already got into that. And Tabe says to Naru that we did it, but she insists that they didn't do it, and the real danger is still out there. But Naru says she'll go alone if she has to, but he insists that she can't, not because he's not permitting her to go as war chief, but because she can't hunt. That Tabe had to save her, and she doesn't measure up. She tried, but she just couldn't bring it.
Doesn't he also mention about her leg injury as well? I don't know, but I think that's mentioned at some point.
I don't believe so, but he really focuses that you couldn't do it. You couldn't bring it. That was his exact words.
Although it's weird because he admits later on, basically he was lying. He does admit later on that, your plan did work, and that's how we did bring the lion down.
Well, her plan worked, but I guess he said, I don't quite know how to reconcile those.
He's not being wholly honest with her at that point, I think, in hindsight.
Well, he first tells her...
he might be saying...
We did it.
Yeah, you might even interpret it like maybe he's trying to stop her putting himself in danger or something. But
maybe.
Yeah.
Or maybe he doesn't fully believe in her. She has great plans, and she's great at tracking, but she did fail during this attempt. And it's maybe not until later in the
fault. I mean... Anybody in there, she's on this tiny little branch. I mean, she could have been 50 years old and built
yeah. Okay. Well, so in the next morning,
go on.
Naru's kicked awake again. They keep kicking her.
Yeah, she does, doesn't she?
Get up. Go gather with the other females in the tribe. Yeah. But she decides if her tribe doesn't see the hunter in her, that she will show them. And in a wonderfully staged scene, as all the women in the tribe head one way, Naru heads the other into danger to go hunt the predator. And then we get this wonderful overhead shots of her heading into the wilderness with her dog, and this montage of gorgeous, beautiful cinematography again as they go out alone. As she goes out to find the trail of the predator, which she does find some blood and a giant footprint she measures with a stick.
Yeah, and it is very much for anyone wondering, this isn't hey everyone, I'm going off, fuck you sort of thing. She doesn't tell anyone, and this is actually pointed out later on where she meets members of her tribe again, and they kind of like didn't know where she'd gone. So she is very much not telling anyone. So this doesn't go against the whole thing about women aren't allowed to be hunted. She's not telling anyone. She just goes off, does it.
Yep. Yep.
So it's completely keeping within those cultural boundaries without screwing anything up. It's totally it all fits.
So next we cut to a rabbit that is being stalked by a wolf. And then we see both animals seen through the predator's thermal vision, which for an older predator with less advanced technology, this looks much further advanced than what we've seen in previous movies with computerized image detection and a HUD with the predator's language. You know, it's much more advanced than the first couple movies we've seen.
Well, the symbology on it, it's like the lines are thinner. It's got more high depth, but I do appreciate the actual like the thermal signatures. It seemed to match up with the color palette of the original film. It looked like, okay, they're doing it with today's cameras, but it looked like a very close match for that 1987 look. If you took the symbology away, and that might be simply due to, you know, I mean, it looks different, so clearly it's a different predator. It's got a different people or whatever. It's got like maybe somebody's got an iPhone and somebody else has got an Android phone. You're going to have different manufacturers and whatever. So yeah, the symbology is different, but I did appreciate the like like you're not getting definition. Like in the original film, he had to come right up to Dutch's face before he saw his face. Up until then, it was like generic heat blob. This one, you get the same thing. Even when it looks at her later on through the mask, she looks like a generic blob of heat. I appreciated that. So yeah, it's got different functionality in the helmet. I would have liked to have seen that classic black strip with the oscilloscope.
Yeah.
You don't get that in this. You don't get the mimicry. I was hoping for that because you get that in the AVP. Yeah, that would have been so cool. Like if it had said something in Comanche or French. Oh, so cool.
It would have been.
But you don't. It was a wasted opportunity. But okay, they didn't use it. But you know, none of it. But I really appreciate the color palette, the lack of definition. It looked like it could have been a match. It's just different ways of displaying things.
To me, it still looked advanced, but I didn't throw my shoe at the television.
Not too much.
You know, it's not something that I'm like, screw this movie. You know, I mean,
you know what else? Maybe the original 1987 Predator got a really shitty helmet. Maybe it got an old helmet. We don't know.
Yeah, maybe he was poor and that's all he could afford.
Yeah, because all it's doing, it's got wrist blades and a gun. Maybe it's like he's trying to hunt so he can buy some good stuff. Who knows?
His ship looked kind of basic too.
Yeah. Which also, I got to say, the original shots where you see the Predator ship go there, you got those two in. They look like they're using the original Predator ship design. I really like that as well.
Yeah. All right, so it's another beautiful film shot that chases on. And when the wolf finally catches the rabbit, he's knocked off his feet, and the wolf can see and sense the camouflaged predator and bites the pharaoh's leg, making the predator screech. And then the predator throws the wool off, and they square off again, you know, for a few moments. And then when the wolf attacks again, the predator disembowels it, then takes its spine and head for a trophy. And I'm just loving this part. You know, as a Predator fan, after reading the comics they have put out for decades, you know, the comics like Primal or the book Turnabout, we're getting the dream, you know, that predators hunting animals on Earth, our big game. And I'm just loving all of this.
I don't know if it was deliberate, but it reminded that, you know, the way it hits the wolf leaps at it, it does the blades, the wolf goes out and it's preparing to attack again, but then it staggers and falls. I don't know if it was deliberately done, but I it felt too coincidental not to be. It felt very much like in Predators with the Yakuza guy with the sword. I think there's a similar way they kill one another. And it's been so long since I've seen it, but I think they sort of like they do the sword and then they sort of like look at one another and then they fall down. So I don't know if it was
Yeah.
deliberate, but it's similar kind of vibe.
Yep.
But
Yeah, I
again,
agree.
it was one of those. It was interesting to me because and it looked like the predator's like, no, you go away from that poor little rabbit. But then you realize, no, it's not doing it for altruistic reasons. It's
No.
like you're the big dog.
Yep.
Literally, you're the big dog. I'm going up. The only thing I felt was a little flaw. I've mentioned this elsewhere, but I think it's worth pointing out. I think it was a wasted opportunity that a wolf is a pack animal. There should have been a
Oh,
wolf pack, and I wanted there to be that
yeah.
sort of Jurassic Park clever girl where you would have seen them come around the side, because then the predator might have realized, okay, I can take you on, and then it realized, oh, I'm surrounded, and then you would have had to see how the predator had to improvise because it wasn't prepared for that kind of. It was waiting for a one-on-one
Yep.
confrontation. They
Yep.
didn't do that. And
No.
I think the confrontation was fine. Again, you realised it was CGI, and I really liked that they had green blood on the wolf's teeth, and it didn't look
Yeah.
neon. It looked like blood sort of drying. But I really would have liked to have seen the predator realise it's got into a situation it didn't plan to, and see how it would have got out of that. But yeah, it was nice. It's nice to see it doing that thing, and again, you see it cut off, and you see a very Predator 2-esque scene of it cleaning the skull with a sort of blowtorch type
Mm-hmm.
tool.
Yeah, it was some sort of like aerosol spray almost,
Yeah, and it
right? I didn't
was
quite see a
melting it
flame.
away. Yeah,
Yeah, some sort of acid or something that
yeah,
affects.
corrosive
Yep.
stuff. Yeah,
Yep. Yeah, that
it
was
felt
cool.
very Predator, and it didn't mount it on a wall. It was small enough that it put it on its body, and it made you think, like, yeah, it's always been this theory about it. Did the original Predator have those small little animal skulls like on neck? Were they what it killed when it was like an infant, and it's
Yeah.
had them since it's grown up? It brought back it raises that possibility again. Are those smaller animals they kill when younger, and they just decorate themselves, and by the point they're getting these huge skulls, then they put on a wall just because they got no more space on their bodies.
Yep.
But I
Yep.
mean, it's interesting to you just get that appreciation of the skull. You don't see that happen with human skulls, interestingly, and you don't see
Yeah.
any skinned bodies in this. You get skinned buffalo, which are not done by the predator, but you don't see upside down skinned bodies, which again I would have liked. It would have suited it very well
Yeah.
because it's a tribal thing. I think they could have done something mythological with that, but they don't feature that.
Unfortunately, I think this is about where the hunting behaviors kind of cease. Well, after he does the melting of the flesh off the skull, which happens a
Mm.
little later, and his behavior seems to be less hunter. But we'll get there. But I do wish there was more of that in human skulls. But and in contrast to the wolf hunting the rabbit, Naru wasn't good at hunting rabbits, right? We see her try to kill the rabbits with the axe and miss repeatedly. She's just too slow.
Yeah.
So with tree bark, she creates this twine that she ties to her tomahawk handle and starts practicing throwing her axe at trees and yanking the axe back to her hand so she can throw it again. And it's a cool visual, but of course, in reality, wrenching these axes
Yeah,
out
they
of a
don't come back
tree,
in your hand. Yeah.
yeah, it's going to whip it every
There have
which
been some
way.
nice videos of people who've been trying that recently on YouTube, and it's interesting. It works for it's like Blaine's minigun. You buy it while it's on screen. It looks cool, and it kind of like it flips back in her hand. It's got the thing is it's got the inertia. She
Yeah.
looks like she's cat. I'm sure it was CGI or maybe it was filmed in reverse or something, but it looks like she's actually cat. Can't do it in real life,
You
but it
can't.
it looks cool. Like the
Yes.
minigun looked cool.
Yep. So I'm perfectly fine with this.
Yeah, the Predator in Predator 2 throwing the frisbee and it coming back, it wouldn't have caught it in real life, but it looks cool. You buy it for the when it happens.
Yeah. Now, what I don't get is Naru wasn't fast enough to throw a tomahawk at a rabbit before, but now that she's adopted this method, she's fast enough to kill a half dozen. I mean, did the bark twine improve her throwing speed?
I don't, because at that point she's got the bow and arrow. You don't see how she's killing the rabbits, because later on with the bear you see her using the bow. So my assumption there was she killed them using the bow and arrow, but again, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe
that would make more sense using those to kill rabbits. Well, yeah.
All right,
maybe, maybe it's the video game equivalent of leveling up, but yeah, if
that's what it seemed like to me. You know, she couldn't catch him before, and now she does this, and she's so good. And then it's like the focus transitions to the background, and you see another rabbit over there. And next thing you know...
Yes, that's what makes you think. But I mean, think of it logically, those rabbits would have been like cleaved in half if she'd have tomahawked them. So I think you're driven to think, but I think what probably happened in reality, she thought, oh yeah, hunting, but maybe she tried it a few times, didn't work, and then she did, bow and arrow. Because they're not going to be intact carcasses if you're cleaning something. So.
Good thing she missed.
Yeah.
Right. So, after a good night rest and some tasty cooked rabbit, Naru and Sari got off to track the predator.
I liked what she said to the dog, by the way. She's like, next time you do the cooking.
Yeah. And he goes, woo! Yeah, it makes some sort of noise. So we see the predator melt the skull flesh, as we saw before, that little aerosol spray or torch. And then Naru and Sari stumble upon a field of dead-skinned buffalo that were clearly killed for their hide. And it's a scene that harkens me back to a very familiar scene in the Kevin Costner directed film, Dances with Wolves. Yeah.
Did me too.
And this is where I think that Comanche dub came in, because she says something in Comanche as she places her hand on the dead buffalo's head, like some sort of prayer. So then when I watched the Comanche version, I wrote it down, and she says, "Buffalo spirit, fly well. Thank you, Creator, for your life." And it's very spiritual. And something I wish they would focus on more when it came to the predator, but we'll get to that later. But
it reminded me of, which I'm sure is inspired by Native American stuff. But it reminded me of the scene in Avatar.
Oh,
where, and they, Jake's learning how to kill, and he kills he does the one where you can tell he's learnt it, and he does a clean kill, and he does that little prayer sort of thing. Now she's doing it on behalf of the animal it's already been killed, but she is.
You mean Dances with Wolves in space, right? There is actually a deleted scene in Avatar that has a similar buffalo hunt, but it's not buffalo, whatever, this alien creature is.
Okay.
And it's so glaringly familiar.
Probably why they deleted it.
I think so, and it's recommended. It's probably on YouTube.
Stuff.
I would give it a watch, but
okay.
So a cigar left in that decomposing buffalo seemed to indicate that there were settlers here from overseas that have entered this land. In addition to that bear trap, so next we see the predator crossing the stream that Naru did, showing that the intergalactic hunter is tracking her. And eventually the predator gets to the skinned buffalo too. But following that, we see Naru at this point investigating broken twigs and sticks and claw marks in trees. So perhaps she's following older tracks, because the predator is really following her. But either way, Naru walks into this muddy, mossy quicksand pit, which quicksand is a real thing, guys. And it's so frightening. And but thank goodness she made this twine out of bark, because after several tries, she's able to throw her tomahawk into some trees, allowing her to pull herself out of the pit.
Like, it functions as a grappling hook, basically.
Yeah, yeah, and then I'm sure a lot of us watching this movie said, "Oh yeah, we'll see this pit again." This is
Well,
not going to be the last time.
I saw it in the trailer, and my assumption was,
Mud, right?
mud. That's how
Yeah.
she's going to fit, and that's not what happens. Which was kind of, I don't know. It almost feels wrong to have a Predator movie where somebody gets covered in mud and it doesn't get used in that way. But
Yeah.
apparently, looking at interviews, they have said they approached it with, we didn't want to repeat that because it was becoming a trope sort of thing, where they didn't want to repeat
Yeah.
that pattern. But because my assumption was, that maybe it was an early draft of the script, but apparently no, they just had her get covered because it's weird because she gets absolutely covered in
Mm-hmm.
mud, but no.
No.
So
Nope.
I don't know how to feel about, like, it. As I said, it kind of feels wrong, but that's because I'm conditioned by watching Predator movies.
Yeah.
As a story, it's fine.
Yeah.
It's just, it feels weird. That's all I'm saying. It's not wrong. It just
No,
feels, because it's a Predator film.
I get that.
Yeah.
So, well, after cleaning up, Nehru and Sari from a cliff's edge spots a very large bear eating a deer. And apparently, this lunch isn't interesting enough because there's this breeze, and next thing you know, it's sending both her and her dog's scent into the air. And the bear deserts his meal, and Naru tries to hit him with an arrow, but the bowstring snaps
Ne-
because it was muddy and wet.
Yeah, no, she doesn't try. What happens? Because a lot of people assumed, she's going to hunt the bear. She's doing the thing. I don't know if you've ever played it, but anyone who's played Skyrim, this will be very familiar. Where you see something, you're trying to stealth around something, and you raise your ranged weapon, which is typically a bow, and you go,
Yeah.
"Okay, fuck you. If you come for me, I've got at least something here to do." And a lot of people assume she did it. She wasn't. She was just sort of being cautious about, but it's because her bow break. That's what screws it up. Because it doesn't come after her. It just sort of sniffs. Because from the bear's perspective, it's probably sniffing and it's trying to keep any scavengers away from its meal. Like lions, they keep away coyotes. If they come too near to its meal, they will chase them off and come back. It's sniffing the air. Her bow breaks. That's what screws up. She doesn't deliberately attack it. It's
I thought
things screw up.
I thought the bear was already on the move by then.
No. It lifts its paws up because it's smelling.
Yeah, I remember
more.
that part.
Yeah, but there's a very quick people. A lot of fans don't pick because it's very quick shot, but you do see her bow break. She does, because she looks. She's got this panic look on her, but it's because she was going. But she wasn't doing it. It just snapped on the and it didn't even fight. It sort of went off by it. But the bear was like, come on, I'm going to get you. And it just races up after him. So it's not she's hunting it. She's just. But she should have at that point just backed out. But it works.
What I appreciate is this is what she was snoring with when her brother Tabe was describing the same thing about his bow getting wet, and she should have listened more to that story, but luckily her dog is able to lure the bear away enough for her to enable to reattach the bowstring. And when the dog leads the bear back, she shoots the bear. She hits it, but that doesn't stop the bear. And now she's running for her life.
But but just before that, the dog runs off, the bear runs off, she jumps down with the axe, she's waiting for it, and the dog comes back, and the dog's going, bark, 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 and it's like saying, run, and the Naru's going, huh? But the dog's going, get out of here.
It kind of reminded me of if you watch Star Wars, where Han Solo is chasing the stormtrooper, and he comes running back, and there's a lot of them. Now that didn't happen, but I kind of got the same feel. It was comical, and
it's not. It's only when you think about it, but we rewatch it, and the dog's clearly going, run.
Yep, yep. But
But then
all
it
right,
gets the tension because at that
yeah.
point things ratchet and you get the and in the trailer it looks like she gets attacked by the bear and you think the predator shoots it, but that's not what actually happened in the film. It's
No.
very different in the film, which I was surprised because I was noticing comments of people saying, "Oh, the bear fight," and I was thinking, but it just shoots it. But you watch the film and
And we get this massive fight in shallow
yeah,
water,
because the
this
bear just you hear the predator click, and the bear sort of like it's attacking, it's going through the woods, but it turns, and it's not the
yeah.
predator gets the jump on it. It does look around, and it starts to face off against the predator.
Yeah, and it's just epic, and it almost looks like at some point where the bear might be triumphant, right?
Yeah.
He has this green blood and water in its mouth, and I think the predator's on the ground. It's hard to know exactly what's going on when they're moving so fast because he's
Well,
camouflaged.
it's the way it ragdolls the predator, but it
Yeah.
does it. That's how that happens.
Hmm.
And when we heard early on in production, you heard from producers and stuff. They said,
John
"Oh yeah,
Davis.
there's a scene that very much reflects the Leonardo DiCaprio film where there's a bear attack." And a lot of people were going, "Well, how is it going to do that?" But looking how it plays out, you think, yeah, that's a real full on bear attack. And this is a film where it makes you appreciate this is why bears are so dangerous. Because if
Yeah.
they get a hold of you, it takes a predator to survive that. And you get that feeling. I mean, you don't. I think the predator should have been a bit more injured at the end of it. You should have seen it
Hmm.
limping or something. But it's when you see them going at one another, it feels good. It's
Yeah.
choreographed really well.
And when that predator gives that death blow and then triumphantly
Mm.
holds it up in the air with all
It
this
feels
bear
earned.
blood, yeah,
Yeah.
pouring on its body, I'm going, what an amazing visual. And again, as a Predator fan, this is always what I visualized. I'm freaking out right now, loving this, seeing this scene, just holding it. And it's
Yeah.
it's it's
And
wonderful.
again, it's not gratuitous. It's
No.
not killing an animal, opening it up, and you're just in a close up of. You're switching between scenes of Naru, and
Yep.
you are seeing a very believable reaction from someone who has never seen something invisible. This is something from her childhood. People have told legends about things that are invisible and killing bears or that. She is seeing this. This is stuff from her grandparents and tribal elders come to life, and she is seeing a bear ripped open in front. She is also in reality. It's like a Star Wars thing. They've told her, right, there's a green screen here. Look like there's a dinosaur, but Mid Thunder, she so sells it. And again, you get the music where you hear these sort of dun 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 with the sort of tribal instruments and stuff, and the music and her reaction. You get this. You don't feel this is a rah triumph. You get this, the brown stuff has hit the fan. You get that feeling of gravitas from this. It's played. It doesn't feel cartoony, although you can tell it's. Again, you can tell it's CGI. Unfortunately, you can tell it's
Yeah.
CGI blood. That's just how it is. But how it's done, and you see her. You're seeing with Naru. She's reminding the audience this isn't something to celebrate. This is something real, and it's something that shouldn't be capable of that, but it is capable of that.
Yeah.
And you feel what's going to happen to me now. You feel it from her. It's not gratuitous. It strikes the right tone.
Yeah. And from this moment, I see the title Prey, and I mentioned this before
Mm.
in my perspective, that I see Naru as the prey. And what I mean here is in regarding to look, the predator lets Naru go down the river and just lets her go. And at this point in the movie, I see Naru as the rat. I see Naru as the rabbit. that the predator is tracking her. He's tracking this young woman, this quote unquote rabbit, to see what wolves it brings out to hunt her. So, so, so he can hunt them. That Naru is the film's title, Prey, quote
That's
unquote,
possible. Yeah, yeah,
that she's eventually underestimated, of course, but it's the prey that will draw out the stronger
yeah,
predators for the feral to hunt within the
yeah.
wild.
I hadn't thought of it like that. That's a perfectly valid observation. That really is.
Yeah.
I mean, and, there is a scene where she meets back up with some of her people, and they say, "Well, why didn't it kill you?" I was privately thinking at that point in my mind, well, it was holding a bear above its head. Give it a chance. It's going to go after her. But yeah, I mean, it can't facially identify her because you can tell she's just this generic blob of heat. But she's going to be the only one for miles around, so it's going to be able to track her. But yeah, that's a really interesting way of linking the
Because he doesn't
title that
kill
I
the
hadn't
rat.
thought of.
He doesn't
Yeah,
kill the rat. He doesn't kill the rabbit, right?
yeah.
So yeah, I just
And of course, somebody else later on tries to use them as bait. But
yeah.
yeah, it's a pattern. Yeah, yeah,
So now at this point of the movie, Eric, which is pretty close to the halfway mark, I am simply loving it, and it's hitting all the right beats with the narrative, the pacing, the suspense, the direction, the
and it's not
score.
romanticizing the landscape. It feels like a wilderness. You're seeing the threats that these people face every day. You're
Yeah,
feeling like, yeah, it's a nice place to sunbathe in, but you're seeing this is a harsh life. It's
yeah.
not. It's not romanticizing it. This feels full on, like it should do.
So I'm in Predator hog heaven here, and I'm also in movie hog heaven at this point. So, but things start to get murky for me, like this river that Naru swims down, and with a lot of rapids for far distance. And I'm thinking, is this dog ever going to be able to find her again? Because she goes down
Yes, that's what I was
fast.
thinking. It went. You
Yeah.
didn't run. I'm running. I'm never stopping running.
Yeah. And then that's when she cleans up, and that's when Wasapi and the rest of those male hunters, those jerks of the tribe, find her. And Wasapi tells her that her brother is looking for her, and Naru reveals that she saw a monster, and they all laugh and scoff at her for saying she saw a monster. And to me, this was the real opportunity to
Yes,
explore the mysticism of the Comanche. You know,
absolutely.
what did I say always? It rings true when the predator is seen through spiritual eyes, like when Anna says the predator, it's the demon that makes trophies out of
Yes.
man. And, you know, King Willie says he's from the other side.
Yeah.
And Prey's setting invites the opportunity to play upon these demonic themes at a time where Native Americans would be very susceptible to viewing the predator through
Yeah.
this supernatural prism. And I mean, earlier in the movie, Naru was just talking about a sign about a thunderbird,
Yeah.
which we found out. I don't know. It's unfortunately this was one of my personal disappointments that they all
Yes, I
laugh
agree.
about it, and it's pretty much dropped.
Yes.
Yeah.
We've talked about this on other videos, and we both agreed. Oh, there's so many opportunities they could bring in. Even
Yeah.
if they don't show one, they could have done something about at least references to Sasquatch, stuff like that. Native
Yeah.
Americans have actual, very detailed legend, in fact, right up to the modern day on reservation, about meeting with what they call star people. And in fact, they are even, there are some stories where they have very detailed descriptions. Whatever you want to think about it, they do call them craft, and they
Yeah.
talk about them in mechanical terms. And there are some that they talk about in, there are some that are, they talk about that are not so peace and loving. And there are also some more mythological things they got. Now, they do touch on this. She uses the word Mupitzel. Now, I've looked this up. I cannot find any reference in any, and I've got quite a big library of mythological stuff. Some that are specifically Native American. I can't find this term anywhere. I've looked it up online. It might be something. The closest I can find is a French article about the movie, where when I translated it, it was on French Yahoo, and it said Mupitzel, which is monster. So I don't know if it is. It's like flower and dog. I don't know if it literally means monster. But I cannot find anything called Mupitzel. I don't know if it was made up for the movie, but regardless of whether Mupitzel is just literally meaning monster, I was hoping for a scene like she meets a tribal elder, like they get back to camp, like in the Hero Quest cycle, and they could have said something. They could have brought out like a predator mask or something, like in Dances with Wolves, where there's that scene where the tribal elder, he shows Dances with Wolves a conquistador helmet.
Yep.
And they say, we have driven back invaders time and time again, but this time we're not so sure. And they talk about that iron horse, which was the steam engine. I think this was a missed opportunity for doing that. And they didn't have to do it with predators. They could have done something else. But there is such a rich tapestry to have delved into. And there are real legends. And the thing that made me think they would do that is in the lead up, there were people in the production that on Twitter, they were posting bits of art to do with Native Americans and flying saucers and stuff. And I thought, they're hinting. Something's going to be, it's too much. Come on, guys, you got to do it. And you could have brought back that scene of the demons who make trophies of it. They could have played on that theme. Yeah. But they could have brought in actual legends, so that if you'd have watched the film, you could have looked it up online and you'd have gone, oh, yeah. Because like Native Americans, there's even, they have their own legends to do with how vampires were created. And they're actually quite like vampire legends from other parts of the world, which make you go, oh, that's interesting. But they've got their own basis of all these different things, and definitely star people and some not so nice star people. Why didn't you bring this? But it doesn't need it. But what got me was that when she does say to them this, she says, oh, it looked like a Mupitzel, and they say, oh, what? A monster from your childhood. I think there should have been that sort of recognition. So there should have been this acknowledgement within the film that it's not like in Western society. She would have said something, and she would have said something to make them sort of double take. Like in the original Predator, you had Billy, when he said, like, that ain't no man, they didn't scoff at him.
Nope.
He had the experience, and they'd worked with him for long enough to know he didn't joke around. Like, he literally didn't joke around. Whatever he said, he had a reason. So when he said something, it was a double UTF for that, but they didn't ridicule him. There should have been something like that, not playing on stereotypes, but she should have said something like she said, you remember what blah, blah, blah? That's what I saw. Yeah. And there could have been something like the tribal elder could have said, these things hunt man like we hunt the buffalo. Something like, it was such a, they could have done, and we didn't. It doesn't harm the movie for not having it. But I wish they'd have done it. It was such, if you're going to do Native American people, it's not going to be something that ridicules them. It could have been something that enriched the movie. You're going to bring that element in, use it to enrich the story. And maybe it's in a deleted scene. Maybe it's in an early draft. It didn't work out so well, so be it. But I really wish they'd done it. It may be in a sequel, but
could have added some additional layers and depth, and that could have elevated this, at least for me.
It would have brought layers of, like when you see the flintlock in Predator 2, which is brought in, but it's like I've said elsewhere, that the flintlock for Predator fandom is like the space jockey for Alien fandom. Yeah, it was something the camera lingered on. It gave you a glimpse of a wider world, something that has significance in history. there could have been something like where you got a glimpse of something's happened before, or is that to do with predators, or is it something else? Or maybe it's something the predators are there to hunt, like the river ghost in
Yeah.
Predators. So many possibilities. And yeah, like you say, it could have added onion layers to this thing. You could have like one of those Russian dolls. You could have got a little hint of that little Russian doll that's a bit older. Really? I want to see more of that. And no.
Missed opportunity.
Yeah.
So
Didn't do it wrong, but I also wish it would have been there.
So Tabe refused to go back home, so Wasabi and her fight, and Naru does a good job holding her own. But then Naru's defeated, almost sucker punched, right, by Wasabi as she's defeated. But they plan to take her back to the settlement, and but suddenly we hear and see the
just before you go on, that fight where they're bringing her back and she says, "No, I'm going to go off on my own." There is a subtext here. If you're just watching it as a Western view, you won't necessarily get, but the reason why they're pushing her back into the fight, the guy she's just fought against and managed to, kick and bite off, he's lost face. He cannot live. He's got a thing where it's a thing within the tribal culture. He'd have needed to do something, otherwise he wouldn't have lived that down. It's not quite. Again, it's interesting because they don't do it on the nose, but there is a subtext there that you don't pick up on. But he would have lost face there, so there is an extra dimension to that.
I can see that. Well, suddenly we hear and see Camouflage Predator watching these male hunters bind Naru and tie her up and drag her off, and once again, at least to my theory, the prey that is Naru has led the feral predator to, like the bear, more dangerous things it can hunt. So
and
they
it's detecting their weapons.
Yeah.
Because the first time I watched this, I thought, was it attacking unarmed people or not? But you do see it notice like the tips of their spear. It didn't see a gun. It actually did the targeting thing on the tip of the spear, which I thought was a really nice way of just conveying it knows it's a weapon.
And it could see it was dominating her, like they were pushing her. And so Itzy goes off to the bathroom. The predator clicking is heard, and the male hunters hear something beyond the log and draw their arrows. And first it's just opossums, but Naru, who observes everything, and she's smart, tells Wasabi that what does she think, drew the opossums her way or their way. And suddenly those 3 red targeting dots that we know and love appear on the body of Wasabi. But this time they do something different. They separate.
They split, yeah.
Yeah. And next thing you know, these darts come out and cut off his hand and forearm and plunge.
Well, they don't go to the center. They go to where each individual laser. Yep. And I thought that's interesting because it gives a reason for them being 3 of them. Because when they've graduated to the thing, technically there's no reason for it being 3. They could just do 1. But here, there's a reason for it being 3 individual laser. But did you notice that in the lead up to that scene, it's building together 2 references from Predator? When Blaine goes to look, he thinks he's got but it turns out there's a possum that just wanders out. Yeah. And then there's a callback also to, you remember when they're waiting for the predator, nothing happens. Dutch decides to step out beyond, and that's when it gets trapped. And I thought 2 callbacks to Predator, but it works well. They've combined. It doesn't feel like and it's like a homage. Yeah. It feels like they've done it in a way that works.
That I would even say that might not be noticed by the general fan.
No, right? It's just. But I mean, I know when they said possums, I thought, oh, it's a little.
Now there are a couple callbacks that were noticed, by everyone, but we'll get to there. Yes. But so a camouflage hand pulls the darts out of the dead Wasabi, and one of them was in his eye, which was just brutal. Yeah. And these 2 other hunters with Naru let their arrows fly. And they pierce into the predator. One being what appears the gauntlet, which disrupts his camouflage technology. And the masked feral predator is finally revealed to the audience. And with this mask on, I think this predator is rather wickedly cool looking. You know,
Yes.
the mandibles spread amazingly far when roaring, which sadly seems to be an ADI trait when they have handled
Yeah.
creature design for Predator and AVP
Yeah.
movies. But regardless, this thing with its mask on looks cool, horrific, and has proportion, you know?
Yeah.
So I like what I'm seeing.
Yeah. It's an interesting kind of like with Predators, they did the jawbone on the
Yep.
mask, which I personally I get why they do. I To me it gave it like an underbite that I didn't like. This it's like they've taken a skull but they've put the electronics into the skull,
Mm-hmm.
which is a really interesting because the laser designator, it's part of the skull. Um, the only thing about it is that the predator is clearly just breathing our air, whereas in the original Predators, it's sealed and it has to actually take off
Yeah.
gas. And like in Predator 2, the mask is off for an extended period of time, so it has to have the.
The
I mean,
breather.
you don't know. Maybe it's drugs. Maybe it just wants to get, it wants pain relief or something. But here, like, it's clearly breathing it. That's the only thing that maybe go. It's a rule of cool thing. It should be breathing its own bit, but it works visually. It's a really nice. It looks brutal.
Yeah.
It looks like a monster. Like you can believe something like this appeared to tribal people, it would have given them nightmares and legends. When it
Mm-hmm.
takes it off, different story. But yeah,
Well, and we'll get there.
keep the thing on. You look great. And the predator's like, what? Oh, shall I show him my face? No, no, no. Keep it on. No, just that. Yeah, no. No. Just
And
you're
did
right
you
on there.
notice this predator has abs? He has like 16 level of
Yes.
abs that goes like
Yes.
right up to the neck. And
Yeah.
so it's even physically different
Yeah.
on the torso.
I mean,
To some
everything on
degree.
this predator, I would say, if you had to differentiate it, I would say they nicknamed it feral predator. I just shortened
Yeah.
it to feral. I would say feral is differentiated between, although it has electronics, it's less electronic and more mechanical. Even the harpoon gun, it's mechanical. You see one rise into position. The laser designator, yeah, it's electronic, but everything about it is like the shield. It's mechanical.
Yeah.
It feels industrial.
Yeah.
So if you had to, it feels like steampunk almost. If you had to do like a steampunk predator, it's bits and pieces on this predator design that are like that. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's an interesting reveal for it.
Yeah, definitely.
And the
So,
fight choreography in that scene,
oh,
great. It's full on. Every time they fight this predator, it's superhero-ish, but at the same time, it's rewarding to watch. It doesn't feel like a generic fight.
yeah. I mean, I'll caveat it that suddenly this is the point where the movie starts feeling less and less like a predator on a hunting trip for
Yeah,
trophies and more of a sadistic killing fighter on a
yeah.
killing spree. But I
It feels
digress.
more like Jason than Dracula. It's
Yes.
just going in there. Come on, come at me, bro, sort of thing. And it's literally sometimes it literally someone raises weapons and it's like yeah, and it literally does that, and it literally gives them a thing, and so it's. But
Yeah.
that's not necessarily wrong. Some predators are more interested in like some people in a video game they'll want to do the sniper class. Other people in a video game they'll want to do a different class. They're handed the same equipment so different predators. I prefer. I think so, I prefer. Somebody said this is more like an orc. The what differentiates predators is stealth, killing things from trees, making you wonder where they are, and it kind of does that at points. But this is more of a predator that wades in, doesn't care what you think, whack. But when it whacks, it's brutal. You see it do what it does. If you're into that, you get rewarded.
Well, in the earlier part of the movie, it does feel more like a hunter. So I
Yes.
do see some of this
Because you're seeing it
transition.
track, you're seeing it analyze, and
Yes.
less and less and less of that. But
So
then, as the
if it
story
was
goes on, it doesn't need to do that.
well, if it was consistent, I wouldn't feel the change if the
Yeah.
feral predator was this since the beginning, but it feels like it does become sort of more of a slasher. And
Yes. Yeah.
but re- regardless, putting that aside, it is a wild fight and between these two male hunters, and that feral predator pulls out that Kabi stick that not only extends into spear size but separates into two weapons, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. Like one's a club and one's a blade, I think, or like a
Yeah,
mace. It's not too clear in the film, but I think they're different. Like it extends, and it's an
and
interesting combination, I guess.
they were losing hands and getting gutted and getting
Yeah.
beheaded all in front of Nehru. Um, and
An actor always wants a memorable death scene, and
yeah,
some of these you can see when the actors look at the script. Oh, well, I die early on. Oh no, okay, sign me up for that.
yeah. Except I don't know if I want to be Itzy. So she runs out into
Yeah,
the weeds, and he gestures her to be silent. And they start doing these hand signals, which I knew what they meant, but I could just assume. And Itzy draws the arrow and says, "We have him," but Nehru sees the predator's red targeting, appear on the forehead, and says, "No, he has us," and pulls him down just in time. And they go running, but Itzy goes running after her. But he's a click button, a click. A few.
she's not
Sorry,
that fast.
no, he's 10 feet,
Like
few
the dogs
meters.
told her to run. This is where
Yeah,
she runs.
she's a few meters. A couple
She's a
meters
little bit
behind.
in front.
Yeah,
Yeah, she's got a little bit of a head start. Yeah.
yeah, and yeah, because she throws
In
him down,
fairness, yeah,
and
she
then she
throws him
takes
down.
off.
He has to go. Whoa. Feet,
Yeah.
don't fail me now.
And then his death is like a lawnmower, right? It's like
Yeah.
it's just blood.
I mean, it's interesting. Could you see that top-down shot, like the Jurassic Park
Yeah,
raptors going through because it's invisible, so you're just seeing the vegetation parting.
yeah.
I mean, you get the tension during it, absolutely. But when he dies, it's just this. It's believable because there's just this fountain that goes up behind him.
It seems a little excessive, but
Yeah.
somehow it
I
fits.
mean, technically, what gets me, and I don't say this because I want things to be gratuitous. Often you see a character get beheaded, and not to make this distasteful, but in like beheading videos of terrorist groups, often what happened in those, they gave their victims drugs to make them not as full of, and when that kind of slowed the blood flow down. If somebody actually gets an arm or a head off, their arteries, they will fountain, and often you see in a Hollywood chops off and you just see the body go down, and you might see some blood come out. In real life, chop off a head, you're going to see blood gush. It would geyser, and you see that because you get the impression it's not just taking his head, but it's driven something into, it's cleaved his torso apart in this because it goes off into the sky. But it's nice to see them acknowledge that biologically.
This conversation you're having is harking me back to Kill Bill Volume 1 or 2, where I forget the Asian actress climbs across.
Yuki something.
Or no, the other one that was in Charlie's Angels. Well, whatever. She runs across the table. She's at like the dinner table with the Yakuza, and he says something disrespectful. So he takes her sword and just cuts off his head, and the head flops off, and then it's like a fountain. It's like of blood.
I mean, technically, that's blood. There's a lot of blood pressure. Your blood is under pressure inside your body. So you get that's why if somebody nicks their artery, you'll see blood suddenly. Yeah. It will start splashing,
and you could die within 2 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's why in suicide scenes, medical teams have paramedics. They have to get really fast because if they don't, there's no reversing that. It will come out very quickly. But yeah, you don't see it in every scene, but here it's boom, it's landmine time.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
it is entertaining, and
And again, it's not gratuitous. It's a little bit off in the distance, and then you see the predator is it's partly covered in blood, and
yeah.
you see the blood. It gives you an idea of the predator is turning and going for, even though it's cloaked, and all that reminded me a lot of, I don't know if you remember, but the Hollow Man. There were
Yeah, I remember
parts
the Hollow Man.
where, yeah, and like right at the start of that, it's a tiger that's invisible, and it takes a hold of a rat and it eats it, and you see it's like where the blood goes is where you see it, the contours of the tiger line out, and it reminded me of that kind of technique.
Mm. Well, it looks like when he kills Itzy that Naru is running through the weeds, and the predator for the first time turns and runs after Naru. Like it
Mm,
appears he's finally going to be done with her too.
yeah.
But suddenly she gets her foot stuck in the bear trap.
It needs to be pointed out this, but in case there are some Predator fans going, but she has a weapon at this point. So if anybody's going, but she's not, she technically it's a point where it does look at her when she's got the tomahawk. So possibly it noticed she was armed at that point. But yeah.
But to me, at this point, when she's in that bear trap, the camouflage predator arrives and examines the bear trap, and to me realizes the prey again that Naru is still has some value and will lure in some more predators, i.e., French trappers, for him to hunt. So the feral backs away, and then some buffalo hide clothed French trappers come in, look at her, and knock her out with the back of a rifle.
Une femme. That's the only line of French.
Well, look, this is what I want to get into, right? Because Naru comes to regaining consciousness in a cage, surrounded by an army of what appears to be French trappers and hunters.
French people. French stereotypes.
And I want to stop. Yes, stereotypes. And that's why I want to digress for a moment, because these French trappers, the scene starts with Naru.
You talked earlier about chewing the scenery. The villain in the French he chews the scenery. The scenery is hamburgers. I mean, great. I love it though, because he's like Ian McDiarmid in Star Wars films. They just told, make this character disgusting, and he's gone full on for it.
For me, look, the stogie smoking, he's grunting.
Yeah, it's
big
cartoonish.
Bearded.
Yes,
they actually refer to him as Big Beard, and he has.
Oh, they do.
Yeah, Big Beard. That's what. And an evil laugh that feels like comically outlandish to me.
Yes.
And unfortunately for me, this is like what I was talking about with Predator and that initial gorilla fight, that it feels out of place and over and beyond, not the gorilla fight itself, but the way, the stick around and knock, knock. It just, it's over and beyond it's outlandish, over and beyond comically outlandish than the Native American characters we've seen so far, even the assholes.
Yeah. That's what made it feel like an Arnold film. When he's doing the one-liners and stuff, that's when it feels like an Arnold film. Everything else makes it feel like this isn't a film I associate with Arnold Schwarzenegger. And here you have a similar thing. They're really laying it on very thick, but I mean, it goes back to the Predator films of kind of like, whenever they do a gang of villains, Predator films always have this red shirt mentality. They make them very cardboard cutout. Although, with that said, not all that that guy among the French people, I think he's also the translator. He's a bit more relatable, but yeah, I wish they had put as much effort into these guys as they did with making the tribal people feel realistic.
Look, in Predator 2, they're outlandish, but it's consistent from beginning to end. The Colombians, and the Voodoo Posse, and
this is on El Scorpio level. The big beard guy, he's like the El Scorpio of this film.
And it feels out of place because it didn't start this way. After the
Yeah.
big bearded guy, we get the
Yeah.
mustache twirling French trapper that approaches Nehru's cage the same way. And then the third guy that approaches cage was actor Bennett Taylor, who turns out to be Raphael Adolini,
Yeah.
a character famous in Predator lore, who they give this prosthetic to wear in his mouth with these overly large gums, with these overly
Yes.
large off-centered teeth. And I'm starting to wonder what they're going for here. I
Was
assume
that
they are.
prosthetics? Have that been
Oh
verified?
yeah.
I didn't
Oh,
know that. Yeah,
absolutely.
okay. Yeah.
I can show you pictures afterwards.
Right.
It's regular teeth, and
Okay.
then it's like something you buy from Party City, and you put in.
Yeah.
And I guess they're trying to convey that Naru is much smarter than these goofy men, which first becomes counterproductive in my eyes, because a strong female protagonist should be able to overcome not just goofy but capable
Yeah.
men. And any level of realism and tone I could find entertaining in a film like Predator 2. The tone is consistent, but when that tone is changed, downshifted in a middle of a movie you are watching,
it's problematic because the willing suspension of disbelief, it puts a dent in it. Yeah.
It becomes jarring for me, and it loses suspense, it loses tension, and it eventually feels like the Predator's fighting a bunch of knuckleheads.
Yes.
So this has really become a flaw in my eyes when I'm watching this.
Yeah.
And it loses points in this second half. And
to me, it's nothing which makes it a bad film. But again, it's something which I really wish they'd have put as much effort into as they put in other areas of the film. Like that, these guys are not meant to serve a big purpose. I mean, they are red shirts. They're not actually really in the film for very long. Although, interestingly, they probably have the most amount of dialogue. But they're just there to be killed. They're not. But I do have to agree. It's a low point in the film. It would have been. They should have been more competent. Less cartoonish, less pantomime-like.
When Raphael tells Naru that in Comanche that she should be helping him, and they believe the Predator is a hunter looking for the strongest. That's what Raphael says. And she says she should be smart and help him, but suddenly Big Beard comically and stupidly loses patience with Raphael talking to Nehru to learn what she knows about this Predator. Within 30 seconds, he loses patience and reveals they have captured Tabe, and he pulls him out of a cage and cuts his stomach with a surface wound. With a surface wound. And I'm just like,
it feels like the point of that was just to have fan service, because it's meant to be done like the same way Billy cuts his chest. But it's like they didn't have. There should have been more to it. But again, I mean, he's clearly a very impatient character, but it does feel like there should have been like a Gene Hackman type there, who you could have had Big Beard, but there could have been somebody else there, like kick a stool, and he could have been like, "What are you doing?" And he could have thumped down on him or something. There's someone to put the children in order, kind of thing.
Yes.
And then when that character goes, or that character has a standoff with a Predator, that's when you feel it.
Yes.
And there wasn't that.
And give me that Raphael, with that Anna moment, that he gets some quiet time and he talks to her and they trade information and what they've seen. And he talks about one night when the trappers first arrived, and he tells this horror story of what these French trappers had to go. And maybe Big Beard lost his brother. And that's why he's so angry, because the
brains of the outfit were hunted then, clearly.
But something to that degree. But, any kind of serious it's rushed. The pacing here is suffered. And next thing, the scene...
I mean, it could have been interesting. They could have done, like, with Dutch having to revert to primal thing. They could have completely changed the story, where it could have been the French fur trappers aren't in control. It's like they've got to the point where they're like Jim Hopper's men. They come across Naru and they have to learn things from her. She learns things from them, and it's only by working together. But it's not like we hate you. They're already at the end of their tether. They're like Mac from Predator. they've already been driven. They've got nothing. They've got some stuff, but it could have worked things into a more satisfying conclusion.
Yeah.
They didn't go in that direction, but it's something they could have done, which I think would have benefited the film.
Yeah. And to me, it comes across clunky. And then, ironically,
Yeah.
the scene quickly transitions to Naru and Tabe tied together to a trunk of a burned tree among a large portion of burned trees and a part of wilderness that is covered with ash. And for me personally, this is clunky because I'm left wondering, did the French trappers intentionally burn down this part of the forest?
Yeah,
Or
I
was
think that's the implication. It's been burned, but you wonder why are they in a different. It's like they're in a different country. What's happened?
I don't even think it's necessarily implied. They could have just thrown something in there, but it could have been a forest fire that they're taking advantage of. Or
You know what they should gone.
another thought was, this looks awfully like where Dutch stood at the end of the 1987 film The Predator. So could the feral predator not be alone and another predator possibly detonated an explosive device here? And the trappers are taking advantage of this environment. So fortunately, there are no answers, but it's not in a good way.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say it would have been interesting if there'd have been a hint of it's burned down because they've been hunting and they've been trying to trap it. And that was an aftermath of an unsuccessful trap. They were trying to flush it out or something, but it didn't work. But they're like, but now we've got you. And the next scene is they're tied to the tree or something. But you're right. It kind of needed some explanation. There is a point where the predator looks at the ash and its cloak is going, and I don't know if it's a reference to Predator 2 where the radioactive dust is doing it, but yeah, something's going on. It feels like there's more of a backstory there. And it would have been nice to hear them having this, like when Anna talks about, we were hunted and sometimes we find men that were skinned alive. It would have been interesting to hear them, like, not, unfair. They should have been scared shitless at this point.
Yes. And Raphael should have been able to convey their history.
Yes. And he should have been saying, we've got you because we've got no choice. Yeah. You know what's been happening? I'll tell you what's been happening. And you could have seen that desperation, and you would have got desperation because of what they've experienced. And you could have got a similar feeling to they found Jim Hopper, what's happened, or that scene where, have you found Hawkins? I can't tell. Yeah. And it's to this day, I rewatched that and it still gives me chills when he says that. I can't tell, sir. And you see it on Arnold's face. He looks up and he goes, it's such a well done scene. And they could have recreated, they don't have to carbon copy it, but again, it was a missed opportunity. It's not a bad film, but they should have done that. And we're just two fans. We're not Hollywood writers, but
I could feel the tension being sucked out, and
it was turning it from a Predator to like Wile E. Coyote territory.
Yes.
Like they were going to open up a crate and it was going to have Acme written on the side. This time we're going to get him. And the Predator's sitting in the tree and it's flashing. It goes meep meep.
And I'm seeing some of this like Warner Brothers cartoons in this battle, but before you even start the battle, the French trappers here believe that the Predator will come for a tied up Naru and Tabe. So they're the bait.
And hang on
though, even though Raphael already said they know the Predator is looking for the strongest to hunt.
Yes.
That came out of Raphael's mouth. But two people tied helpless to a tree are not certainly the strongest.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought of that at the time. What I was going to say is the other thing is they were, French, they were from European. They could have also had, one of them does mention demon. They could have at one point brought in some people of maybe they've got crosses or crossing themselves. They could have, I don't know if it's going to work, but we need, Jesus Christ. Or they could have brought in that kind of atmosphere to it as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, what happens when this battle unfurls
Well, you get
is
that. You get that.
it brings it back to serious territory again.
I don't know. You get the wild coyote stuff in the beginning, I think, on the hill, where these armed men lying on their bellies can never think the predator would attack them. No,
No.
they're only going to go above and beyond them to kill these tied up Native Americans that are defenseless. So even that, when the people start falling off the horses behind them, I'm rolling my eyes. I'm like, this is
So what we're actually saying is Big Beard actually had a son, and his ancestors, sorry, his successor, his his genealogy, his family tree went down the line. One of them was Peter Keys, and he led the the team and that same mentality has crept in because it's a similar. But I mean, up to that point, they were used to killing buffalo and stuff. I would imagine all they've seen is the aftermath of attacks on maybe the predator cloaking and flashing its eyes. They haven't seen how it attacks. So they're still using these kind of musket. The only thing they're not using is like a mortar or something. They're still using those tactics, which kind of makes sense. But they've set this up to they're going to net the predator.
Yeah.
And everything else is like an afterthought. Everything's going on the floor here, like their plan. But
it's
they haven't.
It's not like it's not like they're chasing a man-eating tiger, right? This is some sort of horrific devil of a creature that they don't have any comprehension to consider it came from outer space. And probably a good portion of those people in that time period are filled with religious people that would think it's a demon or Satan himself.
As one of them does. Although they might have also
at the end,
thought,
one of them
is this
yells
some
demon.
weird animal from but one of them some might have thought, well, we don't know that we've only just come to this, the new world. Could it be some? They might have looked at chameleons and they might have realised, oh, is that? They might, because clearly they're trying to net it. So whoever's in the hierarchy might be thinking, I don't know what this is, but we're going to do it. But of course, then there is that line, if it bleeds, we can kill it, which was too on the nose for me. That didn't work.
Yeah,
that was too. They should have altered the line somehow. It didn't. It was too nudge, nudge, wink, wink for me. That line.
Well, that's when Tabe is also saying that you see everything and that she had it, right? He's trying to restore confidence that she's an amazing observer and she could have killed that lion. And
I was expecting her to go, oh, thanks, now you tell me. We were back in the tribe.
Yeah. Well, I think he was just reacting to the fact that, he was thinking that they were dead, right? And she said they won't be attacked because the predator won't be coming for them. He doesn't hunt that way. And that's when Tabe reveals that the plan Naru had for the tree to kill the lion, that it would have worked. Not only would have worked, it did work for him.
Yes.
And she has this amazing ability of observing and calculating. So, so I think he was just trying
I like the lead up to the trap where she said, oh, yeah, a beaver will bite off its own leg. And you think, and he's saying, no, don't actually. And it clanged and they're free. And she says, I'm smarter than that beaver. I liked that. That was a nice touch.
That was cute. See, and that's the humor I kind of like, that it's appropriate, not the big beard. But all right, so let's get to the trap. The predator steps on that bear trap and green blood spurts everywhere. And trappers hidden in holes with blankets over their heads run out and
you would have thought it should have seen their thermal signatures, but
maybe it did, right? And maybe I don't know, and just missed the bear trap. But they're all cheering their success, and then it's short-lived as these trappers get dispatched one by one. One is killed by gauntlet blades through the head. One is dispatched with a net, but not like the one we see in Predator 2 that cuts the flesh when it traps, but this one keeps tightening and tightening and tightening and cuts through its victim until he's tiny diced little squares. Now, While it's pretty brutal, I must say I'm not certain the purpose of this net invention because it doesn't feel like a hunting tool.
No,
You're not going to keep cubes of your victims' skulls,
no.
but to be a
Well,
whole.
in fairness, maybe it was designed to go on the torso, but he's just like, screw you, and he's doing
Uh,
everything. But I
to,
agree with you. It's more of a sort of a last resort thing. But then
this,
why use a net?
the,
Use
yeah,
something else.
yeah.
Use
So
explosives or
why put that on your utility belt, right?
yeah,
So the whole sequence, be honest with you, doesn't feel like hunting anymore, but just a
no.
slaughter.
But it's not really a predator that seems to care much about hunting. It's
Well,
just it's a means to an end. It's more about the kill for this one.
the problem is they established with the wolf and the head and the vertebrae, and I
Mm,
thought I was getting that traditional hunter, you know.
yeah.
But but
It's
the
a more
slaughter
thuggish mentality.
the slaughter in itself is entertaining, and
Mm.
you
There
know
are a couple of comedic kills which they work. They made me laugh, but it wasn't quite the like I preferred the Predator 2 scene with the voodoo magic scene
yeah
and all that, and that's kept quite serious throughout. That would have worked better for me than some of the bullshit
yeah
reload sort of, and one of them
yeah.
literally shooting it and it because he killed himself.
And again, I'm losing suspense in here. And
Yes.
before you guys kill me in the comments of wherever you're watching this or listening to this, remember how much I raved about the first half. But yeah, the Predator, when he dispatches these French trappers, one of them was cool. He threw that bear trap at one of their heads. But
I like that.
I like that, and I like the slashing of the bodies. I like that little coil blade that he threw at the leg of Raphael Adolini, decapitating.
Mm.
But you know what? Amputating his leg. But
Yes.
when he decapitates that French trapper with with the arm shield, it's funny because watch the French trapper again who gets his head severed by that shield and the tree gets severed.
Yeah.
And you
Nice.
notice he runs his neck into the hand of the predator. He has no visible weapon drawn. None. I watched this a few times. No active movement where he's trying to strike the predator. He might as well ran in yelling, "Grab me!" So some of this stuff doesn't hold up to scrutiny. And I'll give you
Yeah.
another example. Like when the predator uses a shield to defend himself against gunshots. But 60 seconds later, he walks up to a drawn rifle, point blank, where the trapper luckily doesn't lower his gun a tiny bit lower
Yes.
and shoots the predator in the mouth or the neck, but ends up shooting the lower part of the predator's biomask, and the bullet ricochets into the trapper's face.
Mm.
He just uses his shield 30 seconds ago to block bullets and will use it again 30 seconds later to block bullets, but he doesn't use it now so the audience can get a laugh.
Yes.
And these are the issues that somehow I focus on, and I'm like, come on, what are you doing to me here? I get it's funny,
yeah,
but I'm not scared.
It's pushing it into that stick around territory.
Yes.
Whereas it should be in the Eyes of the Demon territory instead. That's the vibe it should be going for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So French trapper starts shooting some more. The feral predator brings out a shield again. He starts dialing on his gauntlet, which is and then one of my favorite shots, he starts jumping from burned tree to burned tree, including the tree Naru and Tabe are freeing themselves on. And it's just so awesome to see the predator so mobile, so nimble again, like he was in Predator 1987, swinging from tree to tree. And we got a little of that in Predator 2 as well, when he was scaling buildings or jumping on car tops and swinging and scaling over rooftops. But I'm just so happy to see this again. And this I love, just seeing him bing, bing, He's not that lumbering, heavy AVP American football player Predator.
Well, it's like the chainsaw equivalent of a pinball. You just don't want it to, but he's literally ping, 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 ping. But you're getting this sense of inertia and weight. It feels like something colliding with a tree.
Yeah.
Using that to go.
It feels like a silverback gorilla, right?
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good way of putting it. Yeah.
So after he jumps from tree to tree, we realize that he dropped his gauntlet, his arm gauntlet, and it's
Yeah.
ticking. And Big Beard is smart enough, amazingly, to back away.
He's
in
the
time.
only one.
He's the only one, but the rest are like staring.
When Big Beard is the intelligent one.
Your movie is kind
Unfan.
of. But the rest are killed in some sort of detonation, and I'm not sure what that detonation was.
It's 3 things start flying off it, and I don't understand what quite happened, but yes,
yeah,
something.
Weird...
I was thinking, why has it got to take the gauntlet off? Why couldn't it have just thrown them? Off individually? I didn't understand that, but
and it also felt like the sound was almost like some sort of electric pulse or something, but it was an odd sound for whatever explosion occurred. But
well, in fairness, so is there a destruct device?
Yeah.
Like in the first film, you just see electrical arcing. And
that's fair.
It's not a nuke that people assume it is because of a mushroom cloud, but clearly it's something going on.
Yeah, according to Predator lore, there's really no nuclear fallout, or very little in this. Yeah. But so Naru gets to the camp, and there's a few of the red shirts, French trappers left, and they're all about to kill her dog, or one of them
Big Beard's finest.
And she goes all fight on their asses, and goes all John Wick and kills them all.
It was a satisfying fight scene. I like watching it.
It was pretty cool and entertainingly. choreographed.
That was the scene that I mentioned earlier where she's doing all this in front of the dog. The dog must be... No, I don't want to go with you. No.
I want to go back to the...
my owner with the bear. It was safer with the bear.
Well, let's go back to collecting orange flowers and beets. But then so the scene cuts to the feral predator in the forest, surrounded by bodies of dead French trappers, and he's healing himself. And I just love the scenes where predators are dressing their wounds with medical tech, and it's a reminder that these are highly intelligent beings and not mindless monsters.
But it's only using gel just to seal the skin. I would have liked to have seen more of an array of tools like in the first one, but at least you show a med kit. It was nice to see that again.
Yeah. And I would love to see some trophy collecting after Naru had left, but no such luck. So
you gotta remember, it's not after skulls, it's after the spinal fluid. Is looking for. Any of these people, have any of them got autism? That's what the net was for. So all the spinal fluid.
I'm not even going to address it.
That's why it looks the way it does. It's
look, there's some people that are fans of that film, so I got nothing but love for everyone and all the films that they enjoy. So,
I'm just saying, maybe it explains some of the weird stuff in this. So.
Maybe. Yeah. So Naru does the same thing. She dresses her wounds, so it goes back to like the 1987 Predator film where we see scenes of the Dutch and Predator doing similar things, So it feels like a little callback to that as they're both healing each other, or healing one another. Suddenly, Raphael Adolini shows up with a missing right foot and ankle and begs for medical attention from Naru. She agrees to help him in trade.
Was he one of the ones that was like looking over the thing that was counting down, or was he already... out?
No, he was already dispatched with that coil. He was far away. He was taking a shot with his flintlock, and he throws that coil blade at him. So he was down.
So he wasn't caught in the right. Okay.
Yeah. Now I don't know how he snuck up on Naru after her John Wick fight. I mean, he's literally one leg and hopping around, but somehow he was able to sneak on her. But whatever, it's a movie.
I mean, he's got to get that. Camp's the only place he can get to, so he's probably been hobbling along, trying to... Somehow he hasn't bled out, but
I guess so, yeah. So she agrees to help him in trade for the famous flintlock. Raphael's in intense pain, and those fake gums and teeth are really grimacing now. So
it must be said at this point, it's not clear until the end that he is Adelini. He's just holding her. It's not like she sees his name. That's revealed later. It's not on the nose as it could be. But
I didn't even catch them say his name, but when I watched the Comanche version, they did call him Raphael. Big beard, said Raphael. So I was.
But you do see the actual engraving at one point, but it's later on. It's not.
Yeah.
But so far as the ordinary audience knows, he's just some guy. And it's later on you get the, oh yeah, that was the thing. So
as a Predator 2 fan, that's one thing to appreciate about this film, because so many people were inspired to check out Predator 2 once they learned that this flintlock was, connected to that. So I'm very happy about that.
We'll talk about the flintlock later though, but
yeah. So the Predator, no,
she's healing. They're doing their healing thing.
Yeah. She does that orange flower thing,
and he remarks upon feeling, I'm feeling so cold. So he's visibly, you're realizing as the audience, that's what's happening.
Right. And then we hear the Predator return, and Naru takes off, and Raphael plays dead. Drops like a fish, no more shaking, and the Predator appears to scan all the bodies and make sure they're all dead.
It sees his blood trail. But then it sees him and it goes, what's going on? And it's still...
Well, first, he's scanning bodies that he didn't even kill, which seems, for a hunter of big game, why are you even bothering? But whatever. He notices the warm blood.
Well, it knows it didn't kill them, so it's probably wondering, is there something else around here worth hunting that did?
I guess so, but he was kind of checking the life signals, maybe
it heard them. Maybe it heard Naru and him talking, and it's come to check them out. So it knows something's going on. So
the Predator focuses on the warm blood coming out of Raphael, yet the body looks cool, which Naru's keen eye notices from a tree 10 feet away. Naru speaks to herself, dangerously, right? And she says it doesn't see him. At least Dutch, when he spoke to himself in the mud,
he waited for it.
He waited for the Predator to leave, but Naru lives on the wild side, ladies and gentlemen.
I mean, it's standard because a lot happens between that point and when she's alone, so the audience might not have necessarily got the so it's understandable, but I do remember thinking, you're too loud. She should have said it quieter. She should have gone, looked at the flower, looked at him. There should have been a visual thing, not it can't see it. She should have just realized, I've given him this.
Yeah.
Something's going on. She shouldn't have necessarily realized it's not seeing him, but I think that would have worked a little better. But again, I mean, it's a Hollywood film. So.
She needs to tell the audience what's going on.
Yes, you got that exposition there.
So the Predator steps on Raphael's leg and he screams, proving that Raphael's alive. And then the Predator kills him, which I really wish he didn't, because the Predator I know would leave someone unarmed and injured alone in a hunt. That wasn't his main prey, kind of like how he treated the alien Lance Henriksen in AVP. Remember, scanned his lungs and said, "You're not worth my time."
If you're going by AVP, you had that guy that fell down the tunnel. He was unarmed, and he was just hoping they'd go by, and then one of them comes back and kills him.
Yeah, true. But alas, sorry, the dog comes back.
Yes,
and just when the Predator is about to. No, wait. Does he come back then? No. What am I thinking?
Her brother comes. Something happens. It's either a dog or her brother.
Yeah. No. Okay. Yeah. I'm trying to.
The dog's already at the camp.
I'm looking at my notes. Yeah. The dog is there. Oh yeah. The dog comes out after Raphael is killed. And just when the Predator's about to kill it, That's
Yeah,
when
her
Naru's
brother
brother
comes. Yes,
Tabe.
because she works out that the laser designator. That's Naru realized because her brother knocks the helmet off, and when it fire,
Uh,
she realizes it's going to where she's
yes.
seeing this red beam. So that's how she's figuring that out. But
Right. So he
yeah,
slams the biomask off along with those targeting lasers that you're talking
yes,
about, which follows the target to a tree. And you're right.
mm,
Naru keenly observes, because that's her
mm,
way, um, that anything that the predator fires will hit that tree now.
yeah,
But finally, let's mention the elephant in the room, Eric. We finally get our first look at the feral predator underneath that
we do.
biomask. And holy cow. Personally, to me, Lordy, this is a major disappointment. I mean, definitely it's the least realistic predator looking face we've gotten yet. After my first viewing, I sat there literally astonished that this was the design that was even approved and green lit. I'm
Mm,
curious to know where was the breakdown. And I see this as a breakdown, just my opinion, guys, in conceptual design, or was the breakdown in execution? Because to me, generic would be the most appropriate and perhaps the most damning word to describe this FX. And it's something I would expect in a direct to DVD movie or college movie production, and not an entry of a long surviving, celebrated, different franchise. Uh, Imagine if H.R. Giger's Alien was passed for a different design, like Ron Cobb's. Or we got Boss Film Studios Amenji, the original Predator design that Jean-Claude Van Damme wore, the muscles from Brussels. Instead of Stan Winston's Predator, these creatures would have been less iconic. And it's my belief that both IPs, without the Giger design, without the Winston design, would have had a much less fruitful path.
yeah,
These fandoms rest on the shoulders of these creative monsters. And if this design in this movie was the original design, I don't think it would be a celebrated, iconic monster that is celebrated today. So,
no,
but thank goodness the feral at least looks awesome with the biomask on.
yeah.
So, thank the Uacha gods for that.
Yeah,
You know,
I don't think, in terms of, once the design has been approved, the actual, the people that realized the design, I think, if you're going to have that design, they made it look like a creature, but the actual design concept itself was really at fault for me. It looked like, like a little kid when they're trying to look like a monster and they put a bit of ham over their forehead and they go, ah, it looked a bit like that. It's because of how the eyes are apart. I know what they look. They've done that sort of like angry frown thing with the. They've done like a dinosaur vibe to it, but to me, it doesn't work. They really should. It's one of those things where, like Predator 2, that design, City Hunter, that's actually my favorite Predator design. And
me
it's
too.
radically different from the first. It's got all those ridges and spikes. It's like more of a kind of a Klingon-y Predator, maybe, but it was one of those rare moments where usually you say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But they managed to fix it and improve on it. But that was
Mm.
the only time here they've tried to do it, and I think they should have gone back to the original, or maybe done the Predator 2 thing, which would have worked because of the flintlock stuff. Um, I don't think there's anything wrong with the realization of the design for whatever budget they had, but the concept itself just did not work for me. But with that said, I think the guy inside the suit did some really good performance in it.
Yes.
He did some good.
Yes.
He's been told to do certain things. He can't change what's in the script, but his body work and stuff, it was, I can't fault that. What he was told to do, he did a good performance.
The Predator is so versatile, in regards to its aesthetics. I mean, just its biomask alone. I mean, I'm looking at this alpha predator. If anyone's watching on YouTube, and he's wearing this Amenji insect-like helmet, and his actual face is albino. And there's really no need. If it's not broken, I subscribe. If it ain't broken, don't fix it. There's really no need to. You could do so much.
I mean, they literally said it in interviews. They said they were trying to break the Predator design.
Yeah.
So they literally did.
Yeah, and then they said they rebuilt it a little to make it look like it was still in the Predator family. And it's not. It's
the cousin they keep in the basement.
I don't think it's the best approach to a IP that, and something like Predator versus Alien. Alien is tougher, but Predator, it's look at this biomask. It could have been a more traditional looking Predator under this cool biomask. And there's so much you can do with its gear and its skin color and its pigmentation and its crown without breaking the Predator. And there was really no need for it. And it's a shame. You're right. I love Dane as the Predator. As far as I heard, Kyle was a Predator too, but apparently they reshot all the scenes and Dane is like 100% the Predator. And if that's the truth, and Kyle's not in it at all, even though he filmed some of this in the suit, I feel bad for Kyle because he seems like a great guy. But I love the Predator with its biomask on, but I think there was no reason to break it, and it's not an improvement.
No,
it's not.
And the other thing about the mask is when it's the body language, it's more hunched forward. So when you've got the mask that sort of comes down, when you're seeing it from the side, it's got that kind of viper-like. It looks a little like fanged almost from the side. And there are several shots of it from the side. So that look, when it's doing that sort of leaning forward thing from the side, that mask really feeds into that well. But, I mean, you have to say it's a shame that this is, unless something else is still in production that hasn't come out, this is a shame that this is, I think it's ADI's last work in film.
Yeah.
This is the last, their contribution to cinema, and it feels like the, what we got in the Alien prequels as versus Giger's design or Winston stuff. It feels that kind of nice idea. Shame about the execution when it comes to the concept design, but I think. With the movement, the stuff about the costume and all the rest of it, it was rewarding to watch. It's just it shouldn't have taken that much. I mean, it would have been interesting to see an entire film where it was like the Judge Dredd version of a Predator, where it never takes its mask off, and you're waiting for that moment. Would that have been an anti-climax, maybe, or would that be interesting? It's the Predator. It's got a really unique looking mask, but you never see it removed. Maybe that's what they should have done with this. Maybe they saw it on set and they should have gone, you know what? Maybe we should just do this, because you do see the mandibles, but you don't see the rest of it. But it is what it is. It's just it's my least favorite face design. That's all.
Even though I still would find it generic and unmemorable, I think I could accept this more if this was actually just billed as a reboot. If they took the Flintlock connection out of it, and this was just strictly a reboot and not tied to these other films. Because to be honest with you, it's already been established that predators live hundreds of years, right? And 1700s is not long enough for predators to change if this was the same species. So just to create a new breed. The motivation was that I think the director said he wanted everyone to be surprised again, right? When the mask came off. Just like you were in the 1987 film, But
there's good surprise and bad surprise. Surprise isn't always necessarily a good thing. You can be like, what the fuck is that? Or what the fuck is that? So it's I don't like insulting people because these are professionals. They contributed. I'm sure they were. I would like to get an interest to see what the alternatives were because I'm sure they were different design. Maybe there were worse things. We don't know, but for us, it didn't work, and it would have been. They should have just gone back to the original. And
I
but you've
almost
got to
would have.
remember they did this with a view to it being, we want to make it a good Predator film, but we want to make it with an eye to not being a predator. Like it's got to work regardless of having a predator in it. So it's kind of filmed with that mindset.
Yeah. I almost would have preferred to actually see this film with the original design, the one that was passed on, the Boss Film Studios design, but altered, right? Because, especially with those legs, you really would need CG to really make it a functional hunter. But I don't know. But yeah, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And they definitely didn't fix it here. And I think Unmasked, it will probably be on most of least favorite Predator lists. Masked,
Yeah.
I could see it on people's number one, but
Yeah.
Unmasked, yeah. Back to the drawing board, guys, on that one. And
It's
I'm a little nervous that if he does a sequel, he might carry on this aesthetic. So
well, I think probably the studio will have known about the feedback, but I mean, it is weird because Masked, it's got a lot of approval, and it's like it's complete polar opposite. When it's unmasked, fandom seems to really appreciate the masked look for it. They really love that, and then when it's unmasked, it's completely the opposite way. You've got the absolute opposite of both things in one. It's just a weird kind of thing to have in the same film. You have that thing going on.
And it seems to be a recurring theme, though, that the people who do not like the previous Predators since the Stan Winston Predators still appreciate, like Wolf, they appreciate Wolf's mask look, right, in AVP Requiem, and they appreciate the masks in AVP, like Celtic, and what's another good example? Even the Fugitive in The Predator. So, except that has a little more futuristic look, so maybe that's not a good example. But it's always been the faces, but they've still looked like Predators.
Yes.
But this one, this one seems to be a little off the beaten path. Someone that I watched the movie with told me it looked like they took a Predator and then beat it with a mallet until it really it got very swollen. And
it drank a little too much spinal fluid. That's all I can say.
Okay.
And that's all I said earlier. It would kind of make weird sense that if it had tried to mutate itself on deliberately, that would explain why it's got that orc sort of me He-Man, Mew. It just looks very not healthy. But I think maybe it's because it was breathing in all the earth air because it didn't have the
there you
mask.
go. It didn't have the breather, the filter.
Yeah, that's why Predators some of them came back and they said, Christ, where have you been, Earth? Have you been breathing it in? Yeah. What? I've got something on my face. No, you're fine. We need to work on the masks. Yeah, cover the whole thing up. I don't want to breathe that. I don't want to end up like them. Like what? No, I didn't say anything's fine. Like them. I don't want to look like that. That's why in Predator 2 he's breathing his things. I'm getting back to my spaceship as soon as possible.
Bravo. They need to contact you immediately. You could fill in all the lore.
Yeah. Write a little.
All right. On that note, let's push to our finish line here.
Bombshell.
So Farrell puts the mask back on. Yay! And
even that Predator's too embarrassed.
And Naru loads Raphael's flintlock, and Tabe starts shooting the Predator with arrows, which he blocks with his wrist shield. And Naru fires at the Predator, but nothing happens.
Really nice fight scene, this.
Yeah, he flies off of the horse and pierces his body with the Predator's combi stick, then shoots him with an arrow.
And it's got to be said here, as I said, I was hoping this would be show more of the Comanche's darker side, because they had some really brutal stuff going on. on their tribe. And it was getting to the point where, for me, my mother's really into Native American stuff. She's got a lot of books about. So as I've grown up, I've learned a lot about their stuff too. And it was getting to the point where, for me, I was thinking, there's so much they could do with the Comanche, but it's starting to feel like they're the Sioux, or there's some other like a generic Native American tribe. Here was where it clicked. Where there's a reason why they're the Comanche, because you were at last seeing Tabe using a horse. And he was fighting on a horse. I think they're one of the few tribes, if not only tribe at that point, who were using horses to fight. So there was finally a reason for making the tribe Comanche. So at that point, not many of us would have done it, but at that point, I was one of the few who were going, oh, thank you. It feels like there's resonance. It's brought it back. But you saw him fighting on horse. It was, and he was actually, I know the projectiles are guided by the blade, but he was actually dodging them. Mm-hmm. And they were guiding back to only after they sailed past him, he was actually dodging them in a realistic fashion. He was using his skills, and it was rewarding.
Yeah. And then the way, once he was on the ground off the horse and he was dodging blows, and he'd shoot arrows and then pluck them back out and then reshoot them again. Yeah. Until the predator finally cloaks, and then on the Comanche dub, Tabe yells, "Cheater!"
Yeah. I wish they'd translated that on the English, because it was so appropriate.
So appropriate.
Someone's called predators out on their bullshit.
Yeah.
It's nice to see.
that was some major bullshit.
But he did it in a believable fashion. He is an honorable boy. He's doing it he's doing mano a mano. They're actually fighting it, and he's doing. Predator's gone, no, you don't.
And he's great.
He's calling it, and it sounds like for him, maybe not some maybe honor is too strong a word, but he's lost face because he's not done the killing, but at least let him die in trying to kill it. And the Predator's gone, no, you don't.
Yep.
And he's like, cheat, you have done this. You've cheated me out of this. Yep. And you feel Tabe's frustration at that point. You really do. But you don't get it unless you watch the Comanche dub. And you don't even get it unless you put subtitles on the Comanche dub.
And it's such a shame, because
it is.
It's so
but that would have been that. As soon as you do that, that's kind of like that's Tabe's moment almost.
Yep.
Yeah, and he has been cheated out of that bit. But also at that moment, that's why he's saying to Naru, it sees me as the threat, because he has been the way he's caused such damage to this thing.
Mm-hmm.
It has had to step out of the firing line. He has become the Harrigan, as it were.
But then he hears that branch break behind him, and then you see Tabe's face, and he knows that it's over. So he tells Naru to run. That
he did a Billy on him, basically. I think in that Predator, you see Billy being approached from behind. I think from the Predator's point of view.
No, wasn't Billy on the log? Oh, from behind, really?
I mean, that's what it looked like to me. I could be wrong. Anyway, he did it. He didn't see him, so.
Yeah, but then Tabe brings up those lines again, but for himself, that this is as far as I go, no more. This is it. And then suddenly the Predator's gauntlet blades pierce through the chest of Tabe, kind of reminding me like Dylan in Predator in 1987. He's lifted into the air.
Yeah.
But Naru aims to flintlock at the Predator.
And fair dues to Tabe, he almost gets that hit in. He almost succeeds in getting, whether or not it'd been a lethal blow, we don't know, but he almost manages to do it. So
yeah, but Tabe stabs him again. Yeah, tells him to run, and the feral Predator.
Yeah, with that, what is it? It's like a skull or something he uses. I don't know what exactly it is, but he gets something and he stabs it through the leg.
Yeah, and then the Predator kills Tabe, and then turns around and Naru is gone, and then
Naru's used her common sense.
Yeah. And next she's washing the blood off her hands, crying. And we flip back to two scouts traveling back to the reservation to deliver the bad news that Tabe is dead. I'm not sure where the scouts were and what exactly they recovered. But they know Tabe's dead, and now Aruka, their mother, knows. And now it's night, and Naru sees Big Beard at the river cleaning himself, and she
It all
goes to
comes back to him.
yep, and she comes to shoot him. But at second thought, she realizes there's a better use for him and whips out that coil knife that coils, and that severed Raffaele Delini's leg before. And next thing Big Beard knows, as he's drinking water, Naru runs in with a rock and knocks the big man unconscious. So Big Beard wakes up to a horrific realization that his right leg has been severed by the predator's coiling blade, and rats are now gnawing at his fleshy stump. Yummy.
See, this is very Comanche.
Really? Well, Big Beard...
But I mean, this is a point where she's not just severed his leg for no good reason. She's got a plan. This is interesting how she goes about it.
Well, from her, I like. From him, I don't. And what I mean is, Big Beard sees his gun at the campfire, and Naru at that fire, and begins crawling to his gun. Now, Naru doesn't seem to mind that Big Beard is slivering for his gun. So everyone, including normal characters and the audience and anyone with half a brain, figures out it's unloaded or safe. Everyone has figured this out except somehow the moronic Redbeard, who doesn't, because he crawls to the gun and calls her an idiot sauvage, which translates to wild or savage idiot.
He also, I think, calls her a bitch. Because I don't know if chien means dog, but somebody talks about the dog and they say chien, and he uses that as well to her. So I don't know if it means dog or bitch, but he uses that as well to her.
But I focused on the idiot part.
Yes.
And this is once again a reminder of how unbelievably stupid these French trappers really are. I mean, anyone in that situation would realize something's... Well, alas, Redbeard grabs his gun, prepares to fire, and truly believes he has the one-up on Naru.
Yes.
That he will finally kill her. And while this is happening, Naru says, "You think I'm not like you, that I'm not a threat, but this is what makes me dangerous. You won't see that I'm killing you, and neither will it." Referring to the predator, because she's eaten the orange flower, rendering her invisible again. And Redbeard pulls...
It would have been nice if you'd have seen her visibly, like her hands are shaking or something.
Yes.
You don't. It's a little... I would have been nice to have seen some symptoms of cold, but yeah.
It doesn't affect her, apparently. So, but...
Well, it does, but yeah.
So Redbeard pulls the trigger, and a surprise to no one but him, it doesn't fire. And in walks Predator, and Naru, she steps aside, and Naru has successfully armed the one-legged Big Beard, making him a target to the feral, even though the Predator had no problem killing the one-legged, unarmed Adelini. I don't know. I feel like you need to get your rules straight, movie, but I digress.
Well, in fairness, I will say, in fairness, when it kind of like stepped... accidentally and unintentionally on where Adelina's
I thought it was
leg
intentional.
Was. Okay. He yelled out, and my reading of that was it reacted on impulse, like it did when the snake tried to bite. It just like something is yelling. It didn't see it. It just lashed out at him. That was my reading of it.
Yeah, but
because it didn't know he was alive. It was just he came alive, and it's just.
But I put this in, to me, it looked like it stepped on on purpose, but I put this in general context where Raphael is saying he only goes after the most fiercest prey and hunters, and then they tie up, these two Comanches to a tree and think the predator is going to go after these tied people that can't defend themselves or help themselves, So it's showing me a lack of logic and consistency. So I hear you, and that might be the explanation, but her idea was to arm him.
Yeah.
And
it's nice to see in the head-up display, again, you see the targeting thing acknowledged. He's armed.
Yes.
It's not something I mean, it's inspired by the Predator 2 thing with the kid with the toy gun.
But then again, the Predator has suffered a lot of wounds, right? So he might not even be
That's
thinking
another.
straight.
That's one of the parts about this movie I do think is flawed. You see the Predator take a lot of injury, including very early on in its first confrontation with the Native Americans. One of them literally spears it right through the torso,
Yeah.
and at most you see it just doing the skin gel. You should see it like suffer some like movement injuries or something where it acknowledges it's been injured, not just, oh, that hurt me. Like one of them stabs a spear through its foot, and it's
Yeah.
not doing any. There's no like lasting damage. And later on, it actually loses an arm, and it doesn't. It just seems to go, you what? So there's some. I would have liked to have seen some more of the Predator kind of going, this. Why did you sort of thing? But it's got some lasting damage to it, and we don't see it seem to acknowledge it's been really seriously damaged at points. But
For me, this all comes to where the first half felt more thoughtful to me,
yeah,
and considerate of minor details and nuance, and here this looks cool. Okay, this is cool,
yeah.
and this is cool, and it doesn't quite mesh as well together, at least for me, as that first half. But so Big Beard
works as a Predator film, though. But yeah.
Yeah. Big Beard is the one that finally calls the Predator a demon here. It's the first time we hear him called a demon, but then he gets beheaded. So
literal famous last words.
Demon!
Yeah.
So Naru sneaks behind the Predator and shoots off his biomask, a shot that appears to skin or graze the top of his head. And I wonder if she could have killed him just by shooting into the back of the Predator's head point blank. You know,
I think she was probably going for that, but it's like all dreadlocks at the back there, so
maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I have to assume she was going for a killing shot.
I thought the intent was always to get the mask off and run with it, but who knows? But either way,
that's weird. Yeah.
Yeah. Either way, she runs off with the biomask and appears to be setting a trap of it where she carefully positions it between two large rocks, and she lures the Predator in with what looks like a trail of blood. I'm not really sure what she lures it in. Okay.
Yeah, she's using that leg that she severed from the guy. She's using that as bait. That's what I said. She had the plan. That's what she wasn't just being sadistic. She cut his leg off to use as bait for the Predator. So you see it literally coming up across the leg, and it's tilting its head, going, "What's this?"
You know, but I would argue the leg is dead, right? And how quickly, when she John Wicked the French trappers, were they cold? You know, when the Predator shows up, except for Raffaele Delini, it didn't take them long to appear dead to him and cold. So I don't know. Whatever. Maybe I'm thinking too hard. But
I mean, if she's not necessarily, she's just basically used the blood as bait, and then she's just dumped the leg there because she wants the Predator there.
Yeah, but the
that's what it's saying. You can see the trail of blood. It's
okay. He might have not noticed the warmthness of the blood. He might have not seen it thermally. I'm not sure. But regardless,
that's what you're seeing. You're seeing through the thermal shot. You're seeing the blood highlighted on the ground.
Did we? Okay.
Yeah.
I guess what I'm saying is it would have been cool by then, based on the fight we saw with her and the French trappers. How quickly the dead bodies turned blue. Yeah. But the Predator appears wary to follow her, and it reveals that this time Naru is using the trees. She's the one, and jumps on the head of the Predator and starts going to town on him with the tomahawk, with green blood spurting everywhere, which really looks cool in contrast to the blue, jungle. and or forest, and the predator throws Naru off him and is about
You know,
to.
that reminded me of the again Predator 2 in the slaughterhouse. You had that
Yeah.
blue because they put it all in ultraviolet, and it had this
Mm-hmm.
very similar sort of visual reference. Again, don't know if it's on purpose, but it worked for the same reasons.
It's a great contrast, those two colors.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so the predator throws Naru off him and is about to impale her with the combi stick when the dog jumps on the predator
Yes.
just in time, throwing off his aim and saving her life. So definitely some puppy power. And so Naru runs off, and the predator pursues her, jumping from
They
tree to
tag team.
they
Her and the
tag
dog
team.
at some
Oh
point,
yeah,
yeah, but
yeah.
they tag team the predator.
The Naru hightails it back, retrieves the feral's combi stick, and then things go really fast. So the predator jumps in, trying to impale Naru with his gauntlet blades, but she dodges the blades that get stuck into a tree.
And
The
for the first time, she's used trees as a weapon against the predator. She's put spikes on them, so
Yeah,
it wounds itself as it goes up, which I thought was a nice idea.
and then she goes to stab the predator with the combi stick, but the predator blocks the strike with his free hand away from the core of his body, but it still ends up severing his right arm. At least that's what appears to
Yeah,
happen
the
so
shield. I
fast.
think the shield does that, but for some reason, I still don't understand the spear telescopes in. I don't understand why it's like it doesn't allow her to attack the predator,
Oh, the
but
second
then
time she strikes.
it's I don't understand what's causing it to do that, but
Yeah, the second
it's
time
doing something.
she wants to stick it again, and maybe it's the way she holds it, but it collapses, and then it becomes a battle between the collapsed combi stick and the predator's shield. But Naru gets him good in the leg, but the predator finally separates Naru from the weapon and pins her and tries to decapitate her head with his shield, but she slides between those rocks just in time. And she pulls out what I think is a piece of that combi stick out of the feral's body and restabs him with it. I
No,
think.
no, 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 no.
Oh,
This
what
is
was
I
it?
again. I don't know if this is a callback deliberately to Wolf in Requiem, but I had to. This was only on subsequent rewatches on it that I realised this. But she reaches up, grabs its lower left tusk, rips it off, and stabs it with its own tusk. So it's
Oh,
actually missing the same tusk as Wolf.
holy cow! I actually missed that. Wow! So she
Yeah,
rips that off.
it's not clear. It's only on rewatches that I get. Somebody had to tell me this, and then I rewatched it. I went, "Oh yeah, she actually does that."
But
But
could she do
she
that?
rips it. It looks plausible how she does. She get because she does this sort of battle. She uses all her. She goes, yeah, and she rips it off and
Hmm.
literally stabs through it, and then she.
Wow, that's. I don't know.
Yeah, I thought it was a weapon, but apparently but it's too coincidental for me to think it's not on per. It's the same one. I think it's a
Okay.
deliberate callback to Wolf, but it's the lower left one. I think. Yeah, I could be wrong again, but yeah.
It would seem to me it would require a lot of there's all that muscle and sinew, and that would take a lot of strength just to yank it with one pull. But
You would think, but maybe it's
yeah, what do I know? Or
whatever the
maybe
case. It was. Yeah.
yeah. Um,
She's pissed off at that point. I mean, they
uh,
probably, I don't know, they're about as big as crab legs. So if you can get hold of a crab leg and.
but this is a big crab.
It is, but like a
Yeah.
big crab. If you can get hold of a big crab, because they do come quite big. Like, do that, snap it. I guess that's the same amount of strength.
I don't know.
It's only a mouthpiece. It's not going to be.
If I'm at Red Lobster, it takes a lot of strength just to separate these. I don't know.
Yeah, but you're not Naru.
Yeah, that's right.
She would have been actually doing that to animals she's preparing. So she's got a lot of experience, I would have thought. But
I
yeah,
guess
that's what
so.
she does. She reaches up, grabs it and stabs it with its own mandible.
Okay. And then that allows her to get free, right? And then with the help of her dog, Sari, fetching her axe, she slices the predator's legs, then jumps on him,
Sort of
wrapping.
hamstrings the predator. She does from behind, but
Yeah.
it doesn't seem to get any muscle. I was waiting for it to sort of like fall to go down
Buckle.
on one leg.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that would have been interesting to see, but yeah, it doesn't seem to care that its arm's been severed, and it doesn't seem to care
No.
about that.
Doesn't seem to have
So
any tendons.
yeah,
Yeah.
she just does that, but she's just creating spurts of blood basically. And then, but it's nice to see her and the dog working together. It's like if they had to take down a bear or something.
Yeah. So she wraps that tomahawk.
Yes, yeah, she uses it like a noose and
Yeah, and then gets thrown off. And then, even though he's quite a hefty,
because he's
feral
flailing,
predator,
he's lost one
yeah,
arm. He's at that point he doesn't see her, so he's blindly flailing to try and get her. So it feels plausible. It doesn't like it would never work, but because it's all one move, she just goes. You might think, well, does she have the strength to pull a predator over? Yeah, that's a valid question. But in terms of the tactic, it
I'm
works
able
on
to go
screen as an action movie. Yeah,
I'm able to go with it. So the only thing I'm not able to go with is
okay.
where once he lands in the mud and it's like, is the predator dead? He levitates out of the mud. There's no like.
Yeah, I think it's meant to imply the predator is so tall that its feet are actually on the bottom. That's all I can think of. So it's literally, because if you look, it's not rising horizontally. He's sort of like raising vertically.
It
So
looked like to
that's
me
the only
he was
way it
just
can.
levitating
Yeah,
straight.
he's not David Copperfield of Predators.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
For my next magical trick.
Yeah, no, the feet are somehow its feet are on the bottom, and it's just taller than her, and thankfully it's not proper quicksand because it would have been dead. I guess they just want one of those moments where it's not dead yet. And yes, so it raises itself up, and
then
she does that Dutch moment where she says, "No, kill me now." But I
come on, do it. Come on.
I like how it doesn't feel like a homage. That part, it feels like it's from her. And because she has that extra part where she says those words of her ceremonial ritual, where she says, "You have come no far, you will stop here." It feels earned for her when she's saying that.
I don't hate it. It's come on, do it. Come on. But I didn't need it there, but it doesn't hurt.
No, it didn't. It wasn't needed. No.
But I do love the, this is as far as you go, no more.
Yeah, that worked beautifully, yeah.
Yeah, and then the predator shoots the dart, and hence the plan is revealed that the biomask targets its lasers on the predator's head, and the predator fires in Naru, and the dart whips around, and Farrell sees the lasers pointing at his head, and instead of ducking, cocks his head and goes, "Huh?"
Yeah.
And then the dart pierces his skull, and he dies. And there seemed to be even a lot of time between cocking his head, and impaling him. But you know what? He's gone through a lot, this poor predator. He's got to have brain damage by now.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if it's because this is just the natural. I don't know if it's literally seeing the laser or if it's just he's hearing that electronic hum it's making. It could be. The only part about that, because I don't feel as realistic, is she managed to set it up where the predator's head would rise out exactly. It would have been better if it was above her or something, so it was going in front of her. Because if it had just been like a couple of inches back or forward, it wouldn't have worked. So it's a little bit too lucky that the predator was rising in exactly that moment. But aside from that, it worked. I felt the original Predator climax was more satisfying.
Sure.
But this wasn't bad. I didn't like. I felt it worked. A little bit coincidental because it was exactly lined up, but I didn't hate it.
No. No, it was satisfying, but I would agree it's not as satisfying as Predator. Actually, maybe all three: Predator, Predator Two, and Predators. Um, he it was fine. It was fine. I mean, it's not the best moment of the movie, I would say.
What I think would have worked and what I was expecting to work, because it felt like one of those, this is a thing here and it's happened. She severed the arm. It had the wrist blades in it. It had
Uh,
neon green blood like a big marker. Pick me up. I thought she was going to be like Harrigan, pick it up, like wrench it, or it was going to do something. It would have knocked out the. Then she would have had to have fought with the Predator's own wrist blades against its shield. That would have been like a nice sort of a poetic, like shield against blade sort of thing.
yeah.
Didn't happen at all. Like the mud, it didn't play into it, and I think
Huh.
that might have been more satisfying. Maybe it was just. It was like it's conspicuous by its absence of happening.
Hmm.
Maybe they wrote it like that way, or they shot it that way and they realised it didn't work. I don't know, but I think that would have worked better.
Yeah.
Maybe it might have been that they tried it and they thought, no, it's too much like Predator 2. But it's just weird. The knives are right there. Just grab them, or maybe get the dog to leap up and some. No, okay, go with that then.
Yeah. Yeah, the whole thing is a little too neat, and you're right. Everything has to be on the exact point. The dog has to be there at the right time, and
Yeah.
X marks the spot. Even where the predator stops and says, "I'm not following this bait anymore," he stops right under the branch that Naru is waiting on, so she could jump on his head, and
Mm.
everything feels a little too convenient.
I think that's
Where
where she dumps the leg. So it's looking at this cold leg and it's going, what's going on here? And that's
yeah,
where she.
but still, it could have came from it. Could well, and it could have used the trees even. And the Predator's been using the trees since
Yeah.
then. It just felt that,
It
but you know
should have
what?
used stealth kills and it should have used the trees in general more. But this is the kind of Predator they were going for, a more brutal one, more
Yeah,
primitive, brutal one.
it's fine. It's not my favorite finale, but it works. I think so.
It works much better for Naru's conclusion than it does for a satisfying Predator kill.
Yes, yeah, I would
Because for
agree.
her, it was a good ending for Naru. Wasn't necessarily satisfying to see a predator go out that way. I think
Yeah,
that there were better ways of doing it. But yeah,
I think fans are still waiting for a Predator to win. And I do think there is
yeah,
ways for
I'm not
that
a
to happen.
fan of it. But yeah, it's difficult to make that not
Yeah,
like an anticlimax is the problem. I'm not
yeah,
against it, but I think a lot of fans just want it to. And I always say, well, okay, would Predator have been as? Imagine if Dutch had died in Predator, Predator just goes off, or Harrigan dies at the
yeah.
end. Would that have felt good, or would you have felt like, oh wait, oh okay? Because even if you're a diehard Predator fan who feels that way, I think most casual audiences, and they're the ones who pay the tickets, they would have gone weird ending. I want why did I bother investing time and energy in the human character, which is what the story's about? And if you're going to center the story on the predator, then fine, but you're demystifying them. And I think that's something this film did really well. It returned that mythological. It didn't do it as much as they should have, like we said, but it returned that sort of bestial something's out there, cosmic beast thing to the predator again. And I like that it kept up the mysterious aspect of it.
So why don't we talk about that? We know Naru goes back to the reservation. The little girl yells to
Yes.
Ruka, and the daughter has returned, and she walks with Predator's blood on his face and its head in her hand, and she chucks the Predator's head at the feet of the chief, almost angrily, and tosses the Raphael Adolini flintlock into the chief's hands. And she warns the tribe is in danger and they need to move into higher ground, I guess, because of the French trappers. Even
Which
though
they'd
the
have been doing anyway because of winter coming up. But
yeah,
yeah.
But Naru's mother brings the chief the sacred staff, and next they begin the ceremony that at least made Tabe a war chief, and I assume they're
Hmm.
making Naru a war
They're
chief too.
celebrating somehow. Yeah.
And you can see that she's an inspiration to young girls in her tribe. So,
Yeah.
Eric,
Yes.
what did you think of the fifth film in the Predator franchise, Prey?
I, I, as a film, I think it comes up to the original, if not betters it, in terms of as a film, as a whole film. Objectively, it is a better film. It is certainly the best Predator sequel. In terms of you going for a Predator thing, then yeah, okay. Other films do certain X, Y, Z. They do these things better, but I think as a whole, this felt right to me. Could have done certain things better, and I in some cases I think it should have, like the mythological stuff. But for what I it was a pleasant surprise, and I feel it was rewarding as a Predator sequel. So I put it up there with the original. But you've got a
Wow.
different view.
So you would, is that a tie for first place? I mean, if you rank
Um,
them.
yeah, but again, if you're talking about is this a better film than Predator? Yeah, because Predator does have those moments of cheese which are a bit more full on, but this one plays straight from A to B. I'm just absorbed by Naru's journey. This feels like a personal journey of a character. You're looking at it as a film. Forget it's a Predator film, but as a film, I definitely put it up there with the original. If not a
Wow.
little bit better. But in terms of like, if I'm going to watch a Predator film, I would probably revert to the original. But you know, it would depend what kind of movie you're in the mood for at the time. But yeah, in terms of ranking, yeah.
All right. Can I ask how you would score it as a general movie? Out of 10, let's
No,
just
because
say.
that's difficult.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
No, okay. Adam, I would say. See, if
There's no.
I'm really working in like the stuff about like the French trapper stuff, all the stuff you've made fun out of, I would probably put it down a bit to like 8 out of 10, 7, 8 out of 10.
Okay.
But I wouldn't put it any lower than 7, definitely. I felt it was a genuinely good film.
All right. So for me, watching Prey, first it was a film that scratched an itch that has been waiting to be scratched for a long time now. The setting, I find it so funny when I see people reacting that a period piece Predator film is such a brilliant new,
Yeah,
innovative
right?
idea. Because, guys, it's an idea that Predator fans have been actually, well, they've known about and been begging for decades, you
There
know?
have been whole comics done on the
Yes.
basic concept of
Yeah.
at
And
least flashbacks, if not whole stories.
and for me, it was ever since that flintlock that was tossed to Mike Harrigan in
Yes.
Predator 2. And that was back in the year 1990. The film took place 1997, but release date 1990. And so many of us fans have been craving a film like Prey. And if Predator 2 had been a success, the creators of Predator, Jim and John Thomas, actually alluded to that they would have gotten to a period piece for a Predator
Yes.
3 film.
Yeah.
But alas, it wasn't meant to be. But we did get it, as Eric said, in the form of comics and books. But finally, here it is in movie form. And so I was unbelievably excited. But when I finally saw the movie, I found it to be a mixed bag and somewhat disappointing. As you heard in this podcast, I thoroughly loved the first half of the film. The cinematography, the score, the camera work, which I've raved about, the direction, the script, the pacing. I loved meeting this Comanche tribe and delighted with the actors that played Naru and Tabe and Aruka. And I loved seeing this feral predator hunting, underline the word hunting, um, wild
Mm.
animals, something I've only witnessed in comics and books before. So honestly, halfway through this film, if I was scoring it, I'd be scoring it a 9 out of 10 for me. And I was generally, truly wondering if Prey could top either of the two pillars of the IP for me, which is Predator and Predator 2. But then to me, the second half really lost its way. There were logic gaps in the script that really confused me. From the predator's change in purpose and behavior to the way the people treated the predator. But he felt no longer like a big game hunter, but a serial killer.
Yes.
To these unexplained burn patches in the forest, to this jarring tonal shift that occurred with the introduction of these French trappers that often these trappers were often used for comedy relief, and it really was neutralizing any danger and suspense the film that generated thus far. And the film never took a moment to breathe in the second half where it was needed to explain and argue the trapper story, their impact on the wildlife, their impact on the Comanche, and their counter to it. Nor took a moment to to wonder what this monster really was. I mean, WTF? It's a demonic creature hunting them. Is it from hell? Are they cursed? In a time period deeply, deeply rooted in myth and superstition on both sides, they just brushed right past it. And the predator was just another thing in the forest, I guess. So the second half, honestly, for me, would get a 5 out of 10. Now, often for me, at least in the beginning, it's not about how you start, but how you finished. So I was pretty annoyed by time the first time I watched it, how it finished, how it all unraveled for me at first, everything it built. But now, after watching it 3 times, I realize the film has grown on me. So it'll be interesting where I'll be in 6 months from now, a year from now, 2 years from now. But as I stand now, I'm going to pick a midway point, a midway mark between my two scores, 9 for the first half, 5 for the second half. And I'm going to rate Prey a 7 out of 10. Would I recommend it? Yes, I would. How would I rank it in the Predator franchise? Predator 2 is my favorite. Then Predator. And this is where it gets tricky. Um, maybe I could see Prey jumping Predators. And of course, what would round off the bottom is The Predator. We're not including AVP in those lists. So, was it a good entry? Yes. Do I think Dan did a great job? Amazing job first half. I want to know if there was a longer film here. I would love to see if there's a director's cut that maybe fleshes this stuff out, that kind of fills in the gaps like that happens for Alien 3, the assembly cut. That honestly, when I last watched that recently, it really improved the film. So I'm hoping that happens down the road. Will it happen? I don't know, but I'm happy this exists, and I'm so stoked, guys, that Predator is relevant again. That Predator, people are excited about it. Now, I grant part of it that there's nothing that came out this month in August. People don't have any superhero movies or anything to rave about, and it was just a perfect time for a critically well received, an audience well received Predator movie. And the franchise is hopping. I know we're going to get another Predator movie. We have to after this. It's a success. So I'm excited for the future of the Predator, and I hope his design kind of goes back to a little bit of the original form. So I'm not asking for perfection at this point, but I would like to see something that similarly looks like a Predator. So, but
And hopefully with because I do whether whatever one's views of it, I do think this deserved to have a theatrical release on a big screen. The bigger the screen you can see it on, the better. But it's like you said. I mean, I'm sure my views will change as time goes on. Like in a year on, I might have a different view on this film. But for right now, that's why I said it's difficult to do as scoring wise. But
Yeah.
yeah, I wouldn't say the second half loses its way. It's still like an action film. As a Predator film, it's decent. It's certainly a decent Predator sequel. And if nothing else, I think this is a very workable stepping stone. It's a foundation. It's a building block to, if they can make things at least as good as this, use this to learn from, improve on the next one, whether it's set in the past or not. And I suspect there are rumblings of that because of the feedback. I think they're going to realize, yeah, there's something workable here. They've tapped into something. It's still there. But they need to realize it's never gone away. It's just a matter of you've got to do it right. And a lot about this is done right. It's just that there are those points where it lets itself down. But where it does it right, it does it really right.
Yes. Yep. And I think when the way you scored it as a general movie, you wouldn't go any lower than a 7. And I put this at a 7. So I thought we might be more contrasting when this first began, but honestly, I think we're closer than I realized.
Yeah.
So,
because initially, when we talked about this over Messenger, we had polar opposite views of this. But I knew when we started getting into it, we see more eye to eye on this than we realized we would.
Yeah,
which is good.
And with anything, being a huge fan of an IP, you have all these built-up expectations, and you sometimes you need time to cope with certain things you've seen, like the Predator Unmasked. I had to, I needed a few days to just process what I've seen, because I seem to have become the face of the fandom's complaint. Yes. With the face and generally,
I've said it before. You don't assume predators must have female breasts. Maybe this is what females look like, or maybe this is what males look like. Maybe all the ones we've seen are females. There are any number of reasons for this, but we are probably united on saying, Hollywood, please don't do it again.
Yes.
It didn't work. All credit goes to the people who were involved in this. You've got a right to feel proud about this. It's a decent film, but that aspect of it is where there are going to be memes about this. It's going to be mocked, and I hope you can take it in the good-natured way it is done, because most people seem to like this.
I didn't think of the memes. I'm going to start making some tonight.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. There's a few that are already out there.
Oh, is there? I haven't even looked yet.
Yes.
So, all right. So, Eric,
yes.
Do you have anything else to add or touch upon before we go here?
I would advise, if you watch this, watch it in English to know what's going on, but I would recommend watching it in Comanche, because I don't know what it is, but there is a different tone to the film. It's just a slightly different vibe. So you might feel, even if you dislike it or like it, you might feel differently when you feel it when the native people are talking in their own language, and there are certainly some words and things where you get the true interpretation, which does give it more of a fleshed out feel. And it's definitely worth watching in 4K.
I have not. I heard it's available in 4K. I have not watched it yet.
Yeah.
So, all right, Eric. It was good talking with Prey with you, my man. And
yes, and for you.
Yep. And guys, this is going to be a real quick ending. So no plugs or anything like that.
No.
We appreciate you listening, and we're going to be back again. Yeah, we're not sure what yet, but hopefully you'll tune in. So, all right, kids, we'll see you next time.